Everybody, welcome to the pre-show. We're back. It's July, everybody. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is the pre-show. We got about 10 minutes to go. You can see it's 11:50. So we start at the top of the hour with today, the Core 1, or what they call the 220-1001 A+ study group. Got all brand new questions today. Got all brand new things to talk about. I could probably put this up so we could see that this is working. You should be able to see the rewind question already posted. It's odd that nobody's in there, so I'm wondering, oh, you know what? Am I in the right place? I'm not. How about we do this? Boom. Now I'm in the right room. I was in the test room, which doesn't help you. You don't see anything going on. This is why we start 10 minutes early, by the way. For that very reason, I was testing out some things and left that in the test room. See, now people are here. You can see the thing pop up, and you'll start to see people answering on the screen. Hey, chat room. Welcome. Thanks for being here. The questions app, if you want to get the app to answer these questions, it's the Socrative student app. I'll put this in the chat room. Socrative student app. And the room name, Professor Messer, all one word. Hey, South Africa. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Another South Africa. Philly's checking in. Welcome. We've got all questions today. There's Ireland's checking in. Thanks for being here. England, the UK is here. Yorkshire specifically. Nigeria is here. Another Ireland. Welcome. Jamaica, Mississippi, Colorado. Another England. Birmingham, Alabama. Not England. Let's check. There's Scotland. I was just in Scotland last year. I was just talking to Mrs. Professor Messer about our trip to Scotland. We were looking at pictures, and we had a lot of fun there. Hey, Chicago. Hey, London. There's Atlanta. Puerto Rico, welcome. Seattle is here. Raleigh, NC, welcome. Brooklyn. Minnesota's here. Texas, Tennessee, Indiana, San Diego, Cali. Egypt, welcome. Atlanta, there's Orlando. I got Kim folk in Orlando. There's Southern California, Texas, Nigeria, Manchester, England, Philly again. More Colorado. There's Colombia, welcome. Saudi Arabia is here. Virginia, Houston. Well, gosh, we got everybody checking in. I'm so busy saying the names of where everybody is in Alabama and Maryland and Edinburgh and Brooklyn and all of that. Room name is Professor Messer. If you're looking for that room name. I need scripts for this YouTube chat is what I need. There's probably a way to do that through third-party software. At some point, I'm going to have to get one of those front ends for the chat and for the YouTube channel that's one like the gamers use, so I can be one of the hip kids. So when you subscribe, it does a thing on the screen like da-da-da-da-da. I don't know that that's really necessary. I don't know if we want to go there. That won't be annoying at all for anyone. I guess you don't have to say that. But if I had things that could just post to the chat automatically, that would be nice. So that's one of those things, to be able to do that. We got a lot to go through today. We got a lot of questions. I've been doing a lot of writing in the background. Many of you know I already have my 220-1001 book out. This is the Q&A book. That's a thick book, isn't it? How many pages is this book? 400 pages? 300 and something. 300 and, what did it come out to be? 370. There's a lot of pages in that A+ Q&A book. And so I'm working, this is 1001, which we'll talk about today. The 1002 is the book I'm working on right now. So I've just been in this room without the lights on, in the real dark. I know it actually is very dark in the rest of this room. When we cut to the live feed, it looks like I'm in this bright. Well, it is bright to me. You don't see the lights that are shining down on me right now. But we do that. We're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. Let me quickly check and make sure recordings are indeed going. Can we see the Cylons down here? They are going. We are recording also here. That's my OBS console, which is actually a server that's running in the other room. So I can see that indeed there's my 5-minute check on my watch. So we're in great shape. We've got those recordings going, so I know that's good. There's actually 2 recordings going down here on my bottom right. and one recording up here and another one online. So we've got 3 local recordings and 1 recording on YouTube. And I got to tell you, you got to do that. You can't just have 1 recording. That never works out. You have to have at least 2. But if you have 2, you might as well have 3. We will explain the process, how all of this works in just a moment. In the meantime, you can find a small set of instructions on professormesser.com/live where you will see where I talk about how you answer the questions, those types of things. We'll talk about it all in the very beginning, though. We'll go through all of those pieces. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We've got folks already checking in from all over. We've got what else to work on? We've got so many things to work on. All A+ today, though. Now, in the first hour is all A+ Q&A. The second hour is more like I left the camera on and we just talk. It's the after show. And a lot of times we talk about IT and we talk about careers and we talk about A+, but we really talk about anything. We meet once a month. You can always find out when the next event's going to be at professormesser.com/QA. Once a month for the 1001, once a month for the 1002, once a month for Network Plus, once a month for Security Plus. So 4 separate live streams a month. We have one today and then one. This is Tuesday, the 7th. This is 7/7, everybody. So on 7/9, 2 days later, on Thursday, we have another live stream. That's the 1002. It's a live stream. We'll talk about how do you find the questions? Well, you have to wait because I don't tell you the questions. You have to watch them here. And then you'll answer the questions by going to Professor. If you want to do that now, pop up a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA. And the question will be there. You can see people are answering the question right now, which is sort of cheating. Now you can't see it. Well, it's too late. What am I saying? You've already seen it. That's what, at least you can see what other people are answering. Are they right or not? I don't know. We'll figure that out in a moment. I think the other things we need to worry about here are just making sure that that everything looks good. And it is. It's been an extra week off. Normally they're 2 weeks. The end of the I finish up a live stream. I have an extra week off at the end of the month, and then we start up again. But in this case, we had 2 weeks. We had a week at the end of June, really 2 weeks at the end of June, and then sort of the 4th of July fit in there. So I normally don't have 2 weeks off. So now I'm getting back in here and thinking, how do I do this? What buttons? There's a lot of buttons here to push. Am I pushing the right? It's one of those things where you're just unsure of exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. But it's like riding a bicycle. You get right into it. You figure it out. You get all these things going. Now, audio is good. How are we looking? How's the shirt? We got to straighten it up. These aren't quite right. It's wrinkly. It's not so wrinkly. There we go. This looks okay. We're all right. I think we're going to get started here in about a minute and a half. For those of you just getting here, welcome. I know. You get to see, I'm not really spoiling this. This is actually a question that's up that you see. If you go to professormesser.com/QA, it's a question from last week. It's what we call our rewind question. This is the pre-show. You don't just look at the back of my head the whole time. You'll see me like this when we go live. You'll see me. You'll see the front of me. It won't be this the whole time. Thankfully, this is the pre-show. We got a minute to go. 1 minute, Mr. Sinatra, and we'll get started with these. The rewind question, I don't necessarily pick it out. I usually pick just any question that we happen to have. I kind of randomly grab one that's not too complicated. Sometimes we have relatively complex questions during the study group. Relatively, nothing too crazy. But sometimes we do. So I try to get one that's relatively straightforward for the rewind question because we really don't spend a lot of time on that. We really get right to it and make it happen. I'm going to get a shot of this throat lozenge spray, the cinnamon spray. There we go. And don't worry if you see the answer on this one. You won't see the answer on the others, that's for sure. So this is the gimme of the whole thing. It's a gimme. Well, maybe not a gimme. Maybe everybody's wrong. It's not a gimme at all. We'll have to find out. Well, speaking of gimme, it's time to get started on this study group. Let's go, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2020 Professor Messer Core 1. That is our 220-1001 A+ study group. Thank you for joining us. It's the live stream we do once a month where I ask you questions that come directly from the 220-1001 A+ exam objectives, and we get to see how you do on this live stream. Now, if you're not watching this live, that's okay. You can follow along on the stream. We got plenty of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through this first hour of Q&A, and then I'm going to stop talking in the second hour, and you get to talk. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room. There'll be plenty to talk about in that second hour. Now, how can you participate? Well, let me explain to this exactly how you can make this happen on your side. If you're here watching this live, then you can pop open a new browser window and visit professormesser.com/QA. So type in my website, professormesser.com/QA. Put that right on the end of that, and you'll be able to see that happen. Now, some of you have the app. This is called the Socrative Student app. Socrative is the name of that app. And if you use that app, it will ask you for a room name. The room name, oddly enough, Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right, or you won't be able to do anything with that. Now, if you've done all of those things and you've gone through the process of going to professormesser.com/QA, you've gone through and looked at the app and you've downloaded it and you're in that store, you will see a question waiting for you. That question asks, a user has configured voice control for their home lighting. Which of the following protocols connects all of the IoT devices together? And for this first question, we're immediately seeing what everybody's answering. It won't be that way for the rest of the study group, but you can see the possible answers are Zigbee, 802.11, NFC, Bluetooth, and RFID. If that looks like a familiar question and you were here last month, that's because it's a question from last month. That's our rewind question. We put this up to make sure that, well, I guess you remember what we talked about last month. And secondly, you're able to get in here and answer these questions. We'll come back to this question in just a bit. Instead of going through that, we are going to jump ahead, and then we'll come back and I'll give you what the answer to this particular question happens to be. Thanks for being here on our live study group. Wouldn't be able to do that unless you were here. Our live study group is always available, and you can always find out when that's going to be by going to our website. You can also see all of the new videos that we come out with by visiting our website at professormesser.com/YouTube. That's our YouTube side. You can also go to Twitter and get your daily pop quiz question from A+, or Instagram. We put our questions on Instagram now as well, along with a nice picture, so you can have a look at those. So find out where you would like to find us and just type that in, professormesser.com/ one of those things. Yeah, so those from the chat room, yes, you can type in /Facebook, /Twitter, /Instagram, /LinkedIn, see how that works? You can do all of those things. Some of you are also Amazon purchasers. You like to go to Amazon and buy things. One way that you can help support the site financially is to visit our site first before you go there. Visit professormesser.com/Amazon. You pay the same low price you've always paid at Amazon. They give us a small little commission, and those small commissions tend to add up after a while. It sure helps a lot. It doesn't cost you anything and ends up helping and supporting what we do here. If you're listening to this, you'll also notice there is the ability to earn a continuing education unit credit, or CEU, from CompTIA. Listen sometime in the first hour. I won't give you any of those details right now, but go ahead and listen in that first hour, and I'll explain to you exactly how that works. Now, if you don't have your A+ certification, this means nothing to you. But those of you that do have a certification and you're accumulating these continuing education unit credits, you may want to do that. Today, we're going to talk about the A+ exam. The A+ is currently, the exam version is the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. These were two exams that were released in January of 2019. So they've not really been out that long in the big scheme of things. These exams tend to be around for about 3 years, 3.5 years, which means that the estimated exam retirement date is July of 2022. That means if you are studying today in July of 2020 for this exam, you've got plenty of time to go through and take all of these exam materials, learn everything you need to learn to be able to do this. The exam itself, you need to pass both of those to be A+ certified. The 220-1001, you need to pass with a 675 score on a scale from 100 to 900. Kind of an odd scoring scale, but that's the way it works. If you're somebody who's back into the learning process and you were previously studying for the 900 series exams, I do want you to know that there are quite a number of new topics. Almost just over 20% of the exam is brand new. So that's why I tell people never study from old materials. Always make sure that all of your study materials specifically state that they are for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002 exams. Those two exams and the topics we'll talk about today for the 220-1001, all the questions that you'll discuss that we'll go through today are all on mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. So those are the ones. On Thursday, we'll go through all of these on the Core 2 exam. I'll also let you know, one of the things that I've done is I've bundled together all of my training materials in one place. So every video that I've ever created for the 220-1001, all the audio from all of those, my exam hacks ebook, all of my course notes, all of my practice exam books, everything I put together into one single success bundle. You can find it on my website at professormesser.com/1001success. There's also links from the website for that. So if you're interested in getting just everything all in one place, that's one place that you can do it. Also, I have free questions on my site. So if you just need more questions to go through, and who doesn't, you can find them at my Take 10 Challenge. Go to professormesser.com/take10, TAKETEN. And I've got A+, Network Plus, Security Plus questions there. It's a great way to go through and see if you can go through and remember some of the things that you've learned on your A+ certification. This video is also available immediately afterwards for replay on YouTube and on my website. There's also an audio version of this available. If you're a podcast listener, you can go to professormesser.com/podcast and subscribe with your podcast catching program so that will download automatically when I post these. And usually I post them at the end of the day, beginning of the next day. So they're available relatively quickly. Another thing you'll notice is on YouTube about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, who has to go back and listen to this. Hi, Lori. She is putting timestamps in the YouTube video description, which not only is nifty to be able to immediately click on a timestamp and go to where they're going, but YouTube has started rolling out a new feature where you can visually see that in the timeline of the video, which is pretty nice as well. So you'll notice that it will break up where question 1 begins, where question 1 answers, where question 2 begins, where question 2 answers, and those types of things too, which is kind of nice to have that there. Also, before we get back to the question we just asked, I also want to let you know that if you're someone who is trying to keep up with all of these videos, and you can see on my A+ videos, 137 videos you'd have to go through, over 18 hours of content. And if you're someone who doesn't take good notes, or you would like just a comprehensive set of notes that have everything from the exam, and I mean everything, I have it all put together. In fact, I have the course notes up right here if you want to see what these are about. So all of those videos from the 220-1001, every bit of text, all of the important graphics, all of the important charts that I've created, all the diagrams that I've created are in these course notes. It's a great way to just have everything at a glance, have everything there. It doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos, but it's a great way to summarize everything at the end of the day. There are both these digital versions and public, are as you can see here, the physical versions as well that you could go through. So it's exactly the same content, just in a different format, digital versus physical. You can find those all on the website, professormesser.com/1000notes. And it's a great way to support the site. And I feel like it's a great way to give you something of quality that you can use when you're studying for your exams as well. So that might help you. Let's talk about that question we just went through, our rewind question that asked, a user has configured voice control for their home lighting. Which of the following protocols connects all of the IoT devices together? And the possible answers were Zigbee, 802.11, NFC, Bluetooth, and RFID. And as you can see here, 80% of you said Zigbee. Which, what in the world are you talking about, Zigbee? I don't even know what that is. Well, it's a relatively new technology. Those of you that answered Zigbee got it absolutely right. This is one of the major Internet of Things technologies. It's a type of protocol and effectively a network infrastructure that connects all of these IoT devices together. It doesn't use your 802.11 network. It doesn't use Bluetooth. Has its own way of talking. And just like bees that all communicate to each other, they have methods of talking back and forth. That's the way Zigbee works as well. It meshes everything together in your home. You don't have to configure anything. You don't have to set up a separate network. You don't have to make sure that you have a certain router type. You don't even have to think about it. It does it all in the background. You don't even know, which I guess is good and bad in many ways. But Zigbee is the right answer for that one. If you were here last month, You probably remember that little B. If you answered A, Zigbee, that is absolutely correct. It's not 802.11, does not use 802.11 to do that, or NFC, the near field communication, doesn't use Bluetooth, and it doesn't use RF identification. None of those things are used with these IoT, the Internet of Things devices. It's Zigbee that uses that. If you aren't familiar with Zigbee, this comes directly from a video on my site, the 221001 section 2.4. The video is Wireless Network Technologies. Go back through that video and you'll learn more about those. And if you didn't get it right, now you've learned something and you're ready for that question if it ever shows up on an exam you're taking. One of the things you'll notice about the A+ exam is it is not all multiple choice questions. Oh no, you don't get A, B, C, and D all the way through. The first handful of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice. They are what CompTIA calls a performance-based question. A performance-based question is one that is anything but multiple choice. It could be fill in the blank. It could be popping you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. It could be a matching question. It could be one where you have to put things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You never know exactly what they're going to ask and how they'll ask it, but will always contain information that comes directly from the exam objectives. This is one that you should be able to be familiar with. If you know the content, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question, you'll be able to answer it. So I put together, and our very first new question of every month is putting together these things where I want to know and figure out how well you do with a performance-based question. So let's go through and see if you can work through a performance-based question. I have our first question, our first new question of the day is this performance-based question, which asks, sort these technologies from highest throughput to lowest. And I have, well, I've just ruined it for everybody, haven't I? I jumped ahead. Do you see what happens there when you push too many buttons on your screen? Nobody look. It's a secret. You didn't see anything. Whenever I do these things, I'm always wondering, am I ever going to push a button too much? Yeah, there it is. So you'll have to figure it out. Pretend that part never happened. For that, we go back in time. Let's see this. And let's look at this question, everyone, that you've never seen before in your life. Hopefully this is one you'll step through. By the way, this is a very common type of question to get with performance-based questions, is a sorting question. People think the performance-based questions are all a simulation of some kind. Not a simulation. It's a one where you need to sort these things through. So here's the performance-based question. Sort these technologies from highest throughput to lowest. Here are the 5 technologies for those of you listening on the podcast who have no idea what's going on here. A is SATA Revision 3.0. B is USB 2.0. C is Thunderbolt V2. D is 1000 base T. And E is a total throughput of 802.11 AC. Don't you wish you had looked harder whenever I was deleting those things? You would have really figured out what those things were. Maybe some of you did. See if you can sort those technologies from highest throughput to lowest. I have SATA Revision 3.0, USB 2.0, Thunderbolt V2, 1000 base T, and the total throughput of 802.11 AC. What's it going to be? So some of them will be one of those examples to have this here. On your exam, they are not all going to be what some people will call a simulation. So that's one of those situations where you will get a mixture of different kinds of questions on your exam. Feel free to step through all of those. And this is a very common type that you will get to have all of these here. What would it be? Now you can put these in order. If you already think they're in order, then you can answer in the results that you see online at professormesser.com/QA. Put it in at A, B, C, D, E if you think they're already in order, which I don't think is what it is. So feel free to go through and see if you can remember what it might be. Remember, no questions, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. You want to go through and figure out the details of knowing what this is by putting it in at professormesser.com/QA. Be a great way to do that. Now, this is one, by the way, this comes from multiple videos in the course. So I didn't get this from one place. So you really would have had to go through a number of those to be able to figure out all the different speeds and feeds, as we call it in the industry, of what it happens to be. So hopefully it's one you're familiar with. Yeah, maybe this, if you don't know, make a guess. I think that's an important one for the exam, is that you give it a shot and you figure out these details. Now that you've sort of already seen it one time, let's have you see it again and figuring out the details of this. Let's step through each of these technologies from highest throughput to lowest. Of those, we had SATA Revision 3.0, USB 2.0, Thunderbolt V2, 1000 base T, and the total throughput of 802.11 AC. Of those 5, the one with the highest throughput is Thunderbolt V2. What? Is it really? Yes, it is. With a massive 20 gigabit per second. And of course, Thunderbolt V3 has some additional capabilities, but you get some great speeds from that. That's a good example of how we connect different pieces of video equipment, which has very high throughputs. You connect a 4K display via Thunderbolt, it's going to need a lot of throughput. So 20 gigabit per second makes absolute sense. I connect up a lot of storage devices with Thunderbolt, and I use that in real time over Thunderbolt to be able to edit my videos. So that's one of those that does come in handy to have all of that available. So Thunderbolt's a pretty common technology to see across many types of operating systems and different pieces. So a lot of people think it's just Apple. No. Thunderbolt used for a lot of different technologies. Let's have a look at the next one. Next on our list then would be 802.11ac. The wireless network of 802.11ac has a total maximum theoretical throughput of almost 7 gigabits per second. So if you have the right combination of radios and you're able to stream it with other devices that can support those numbers of channels, then absolutely you can get almost 7 gigabits per second from that. We have 3 more to go through. So next on our list, just under the 6.8 gigabits per second, at 6 gigabits per second, we have SATA Revision 3.0. So that is the next highest throughput. We're going from highest to lowest, so that would be our next highest throughput with this. Now we're starting to drop from there. At 6 gigabit per second, the next to last one on our list is 1000 base T, almost a giveaway at the speed there, because 1000 base T is 1 gigabit per second, or 1000 megabits per second. So that was one that would be 1 gigabit per second. And lastly on our list, we still have these. I still plug into these things all the time, is USB 2.0. I've got plenty of USB 2.0 devices all over the place. They operate at a whopping speed of 480 megabits per second. Almost half a gig, but certainly the lowest throughput in this list of 5. So let's summarize this again. Thunderbolt V2 operates at 20 gigabits per second. The total throughput of 802.11ac operates at 6.8 gigabits per second, or somewhere around there. SATA Revision 3.0 is 6 gigabits per second. 1000 base T is 1 gigabits per second. And USB 2.0 is 480 megabits per second, about half a gig to be able to do that. Now, one of the questions in the chat room, and a good question, is do you get partial credit on the exam? There is a frequently asked questions page on CompTIA's website where they have said in some situations they might give you partial credit, which is not an answer. I would have to say that is, I guess it's a frequently asked question. They did not give me a frequently asked answer for that one. So they've said maybe, we might, we could, possibly on that one. But that's one of those situations where I would hope on a question like this, where it's so clearly you could fit a partial credit in, I would hope they do. So the fact they even say that they do in some cases, I think might lead them to do it in questions like this. The best thing I can recommend for you is always answer the question. Always set up the matching, always put them in order, even if you're not quite sure, to be able to do that. Pretty important to have all of those things there. Make sure all of that happens. That's one for this that you will certainly run into and be able to get all of that together and working. Hopefully it's one you're familiar with. Now, if you don't know about these feeds and speeds, they are all directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with those. It will really help you when you're studying for your exam. Let's do some more questions. This one I'm not going to give away this one when we go through the questions. So we're back to multiple choice, thankfully. So we can go between A, B, C, D, and E. Our question on our list asks, a user has connected their laptop to an external monitor and they would like the information on the laptop LCD to be mirrored on the external monitor. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be a video function key, digitizer settings, a brightness setting, a touchscreen alignment, or inverter settings? Got 5 options there. So it's a video function key, digitizer settings, brightness setting, touchscreen alignment, or inverter settings. If you think you know the answer, you want to answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. You want to no answers in the chat room, no guesses in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we're on the exam and we're asking these questions. We have to answer them right now to have this here. A question from the chat room, in fact, is, will I upload my daily pop quiz questions on Twitter also on my YouTube channel? So the ones that I do every day that you see in email, that you see in Twitter, that you see in Instagram, those are currently not on my YouTube channel. I don't really have a plan to do this on a YouTube channel. So that's one of those situations where I don't think that I'm planning to make a video version of it. I don't know there's a lot of value there. It's also on my website. You can go to my website and see it as well. So it's one of those where probably not a YouTube version of it to have this. But there are daily questions you can get at professormesser.com. You can sign up for the email, have them sent right to your inbox. You'll see them on Twitter. You'll see them on Instagram. I try to put them everywhere. And you can go on my website and go back in time and go back through all of the 1001 questions or all of the 1002 questions. So that might help you as well. I've got a whole archive of them there that you can go through for this. Last question from the chat room. Are the questions we're doing here the same questions as my practice exams? Nope. The question in my practice exams book, you've never seen anywhere, and you won't. These are exclusive to the book. I wrote them for the book. That's the only place you'll ever see them. Well, there's certainly similar ones. You know, there's matching questions. There's fill in the blank. There's the same type of questions. No fill in the blank, but there's type of questions you'll see on there. Let's see how you did with this one. The question was that a user had connected their laptop to an external monitor, and they would like the information on the laptop LCD to be mirrored on the external monitor. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it a video function key, digitizer settings, brightness setting, touchscreen alignment, or inverter settings? And 86% of you said you would use the video function key for that. 8% of you said you would modify the inverter settings, and 6% of you said you would change the digitizer settings. Now you can see that 0% said touch brightness or touch screen. That's not what you would use. So 86% seems to be a massive number of people saying, yes, that's what it is. And if you've ever worked with a laptop and plugged in a device, then you probably know that there's got to be some way to redirect where things go. And in fact, there's a toggle button, usually it's the function key that's on your laptop keyboard, that allows you to function and change between just displaying information on the computer, showing it as a duplicate, where you're duplicating what is on the LCD screen, which was the question that was here. We're mirroring that information. We can extend the two screens so that your screen on your laptop shows one thing, and it is extending and showing something completely different on the LCD or the external monitor. And then if you just want a projector only or external device only, you can set that up so your laptop screen goes black. Sometimes that's important to use as well. There's usually a switch on your keyboard too. If you, on your laptop, if you close the screen, sometimes that turns your laptop off. So that's not always what you would want to run into. That function key, by the way, if you've never worked on these laptops, right down here at the bottom, there is the FN key. It stands for function. And on this particular laptop, everything that's in blue are the functions that will allow you to change things. So brightness, for instance, is the same as the F5 key. You hold down the function key and hit the F5. If you want to turn off the sound and mute it, you would hold function key and F6. And on this one, you can see a little picture of a laptop. I guess that's what that is. And a picture of an external display. That's what they're trying to tell you. So hitting the function key and holding F4 on this keyboard is the one that will allow you to run through and change what those happen to be. So it's right there on your screen. You're able to see it. So those of you that did answer video function key, the 86% of you got that one absolutely right. I think they try to summarize or try to standardize on every single one of these keyboards, but it can be any one of those. Sometimes it's F8. Sometimes it's a whole different set of keys somewhere else. Every laptop's a little bit different to be able to have those there. So if you answered A, video function key, absolutely correct. Digitizer settings would be if this is a screen that supports either a touch pen or a touch screen with your finger, there would be digitizer settings that you would configure out, can work through there. But in this case, we're not talking about digitizer settings. We're talking about how we get video to that external display. The brightness setting would obviously change the way the LCD screen is lit. That's not what we're trying to do. Touchscreen alignment, which normally does not have to be done any longer, would be if we had to change the way the touchscreen is understanding where we are touching on it. We need to calibrate it in some way. That's what we would use. And inverter settings, the inverters, if you got an older laptop that still has those cold cathode fluorescent lamps inside of it, then that is something that would convert the DC that's inside of your laptop to AC. It inverts it to AC so that you're able to use those backlights. Not a lot of laptops still have those in them. Almost everything now is going to have LEDs, but I guarantee you, if you work in any type of large environment, there's all kinds of old things you're going to find. You'll find an old laptop somewhere that's got an old inverter in it. In this case, the only question that really makes sense is A, the video function key. 87% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another question. Got one for you. It's right here, and it asks, get it on my screen. Before I give you the answer, here's the question that asks, a mail client is sending a message to a mail server over a non-encrypted port. Which of these would best describe this communication? A mail client is sending a message to a mail server over a non-encrypted port. Which of these would best describe this communication? Is that TCP 80? Is it TCP 25? Is it TCP 3389? Is it TCP 110? Or is it TCP 143? Oh, those port numbers, they always come back to bite you. A mail client sending a message to a mail server over a non-encrypted port. Which of these would best describe this communication? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer this question right there. Remember, no answers in the chat room, please. No questions in the chat room, please, and no hints in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answer. We'll have to figure out which one of these. This may be one of those. I think in the chat room, you folks are right. There may be some of these you do remember, and you may be able to throw it out as a possible answer. So I give you 5 different answers here. The exam probably will only give you 4, although there's some questions on the exam that do give you 5 of them. So a lot of you are saying, I hate these port numbers. It's like rote memorization. There is a little bit of memorization. Every exam, of course, requires you remember things. But in this case, you'll notice I'm not asking you a trivia question. You kind of have to figure out, based on the question, what it is the answer is looking for. And this is very common on the CompTIA questions, is there's multiple steps you have to go through to be able to get to that point. So hopefully it's one that you're stepping through those steps. You're going through those steps and figuring out, okay, what are they really looking for to be able to make this happen? It's one of those where a lot of people just spend a lot of time studying the acronyms and what the acronyms mean. You will never be asked what an acronym means on the exam. And CompTIA doesn't care if you know what the acronym is. I know what HTTP stands for. CompTIA doesn't care that you know what HTTP stands for. In fact, many of us use acronyms in the industry all the time and have to, wait, what does that stand for again? HTTP. Oh, yeah, that's right. We use it so few times. We're just always using the acronym. But what we do with the acronym is we know what the acronym means. We know what it stands for. We know what you do with that. We know how it fits into the big picture of things. So that's the important part, is how do you use that technology? How do you implement that technology? The fact that it's an acronym doesn't matter. So let's see how we do with this one. The question was, a mail client is sending a message to a mail server over a non-encrypted port. Which of these would best describe this communication? Would it be TCP 80, TCP 25, TCP 3389, TCP 110, or TCP 143? And just a bare majority, 52% of you say that it's B, TCP 25. 19% said it's TCP 110. 14% said TCP 143. 11% said TCP 80. So of the ones that were remaining, the 3 that were there at least, almost a 3-way tie, very close to each other. And then way back at 3% is TCP 3389. Well, one of the things you have to do is look at the question and know, okay, it's not encrypted traffic, which may or may not be important in the big scheme of things, depending on what the possible answers might be. But we do know that it's a mail client sending a message to a mail server. So there's only so many possible ports this could be. The only one in this list that possibly would be related to a mail server is going to be one that's running TCP/25, and that would be the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. Now, a lot of you in the chat room are saying, but wait, you would never set up a device to communicate to a mail server over a non-encrypted port. Well, you might not. But I guarantee you, go to any large gathering, especially an industry trade show, and just start capturing traffic from the wireless network. I guarantee you, you're going to find a lot of non-encrypted data because nothing is ever 100%. So knowing these protocols and knowing these port numbers becomes pretty useful. SMTP is what's used to transfer mail from a mail server, really between mail servers. We're sending messages out between a client and a server or between mail servers. A great way to do it. This is one, whenever you start getting into the details of these questions, you do want to have a look through the different answers. The only possible answer that you could possibly look at here, we had TCP 80, TCP 25, TCP 3389, TCP 110, and TCP 143. That's the only one that would possibly be a client sending a message to a mail server. And that was your real key here, is that there's mail involved, but it's not POP3 and it's not IMAP. And you know it isn't because the client is sending the message to the mail server. That was the question here. A mail client is sending a message to a mail server. That was your secret code word right there, that is SMTP. So if you spend a lot of time remembering, oh, SMTP is TCP/25. SMTP is TCP/25. You've now memorized that SMTP is TCP/25, but that doesn't tell you what it does. TCP/25, oh, that's when a mail client sends message to a mail server, or two mail servers send messages to each other. That's where then you could probably put it all together. Then it would all fit together for you. And that's why we certainly looked at the SMTP. That was the right answer. Those of you that answered TCP/25, you were spot on with those and being able to make those happen. Whenever you see anything related to TCP/25, most likely that is going to be your SMTP when you work through it. Now, you've got other port numbers on here. Now, why wasn't it these port numbers? TCP 80, for example, is HTTP. We already talked about that one. The Hypertext Transfer Protocol, that's web browsing traffic. So we know it's not that one. 19% of you said TCP 110, that's POP3. That's when you are retrieving or receiving an email message. That would not be it. TCP 143, also an email protocol, but again, receiving emails using IMAP. And then the last one was TCP 3389, which has nothing to do with email. That's a remote desktop port number. So if you're doing anything with a remote desktop, that's what it would be for that one. So if you work through all of those and you figured out, okay, I know which one it could possibly be for this, then you were absolutely right to have those there. That might help you as you're stepping through all of these and figuring out the details. Almost the same. I absolutely put those email port numbers in there because you could certainly find those on your exam. Absolutely. So these questions that I'm asking, of course, are questions that have the topics that come from the exam. And one of the things I always tell you is that you need to make sure you get a good book, you watch some videos, you go through the process of getting as much hands-on as possible, and then try to get as much Q&A as possible. And one of the things I found, however, there's not a lot of great Q&A out there. Certainly not a lot of original Q&A. There's not a lot of well-written Q&A. There's a lot of problems in our industry of finding this quality content, so I decided to write some myself. So I created an entire book of 3 complete practice exams that include performance-based questions, multiple choice-based questions, 90 questions in each one of them. And it's 370 pages with 3 separate exams that are in there. And it's a PDF file, which makes it so easy for anyone to be able to use. But it's not just any PDF file. I have the PDF in front of me on the screen right now in my PDF reader. And here's an example of how I think most people would use this book. In fact, we'll do this first question, which says, the printer in the accounting department has stopped all printing processes. The print queue shows that there are 7 jobs in the queue that are waiting to be printed. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Would you A, send a test job to the printer and move it to the top of the queue? Would you restart the printer spooler? Would you install an updated version of the printer driver, or would you delete everything in the queue and resend the print jobs? Now, if you have the book in front of you, the quick answers are on page 31. The details for this particular answer on page 39. But instead of scrolling down to page 39, I just put links in the PDF. So if you click where it says the details 39, it takes you to page 39 automatically. And then you've got the question that was there, and it shows you the answer is B, restart the printer spooler. And I explained to you why that's the right answer, which of course is important for you to know. But I think even more important for you to know is I list out all of the incorrect answers, and I tell you why each incorrect answer was incorrect, which I think is more important, because if I get this wrong, I want to know, why did I get this wrong? Why was that not the right answer? And sometimes it's the way the question is written. Sometimes it's the content of the question itself. And sometimes it's just raw knowledge of the technology. CompTIA will force you to understand all of these. And then at the bottom, and this is unique to this book, you will not find this anywhere, is there's a QR code. And if you've got your phone with you right now, pop open your camera and just point it at your screen. You don't have to take a picture, just point your camera at the screen. And it will take you to the page, to the video on my site that explains the topic that was discussed in this question. So you've got the 221,001 Objective 5.6 troubleshooting printers, or you can just click the link in the PDF itself, and of course it will take you there. So you've got many ways to kind of reinforce, did I get it right? Why did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Why did I get it wrong? And then of those other questions where I thought I might have gone, why were those questions not correct? And then ultimately, let's review some of that content to figure out all those details. And then if I want to go back to the questions, I use the back button in my browser, which in my browser is command back bracket. And it takes me back to the original set of questions, and I can go to the next one. So I can go to A7 and go through that list of them. That's all in these practice exams. So for those of you that are interested in the practice exams, it's professormesser.com/core1pe. That will take you right to the page. There's also links on my website for this. You'll notice there's not a Core 2 practice exams on my website right now, but there is one coming. I'm typing it every day. I wrote some new questions for the Core 2 practice exams this morning. So this is one that's all I do right now is I write content. It's available in a PDF form for that $25 that's there. You can also bundle it with my course notes and save a little bit of money off of those. And there's a physical version you can purchase too. If you purchase the physical version, you get the digital version for free. So you can start working on it immediately while you're waiting for this to arrive. Is a great way to do it. So hopefully you'll see that that might help you too for the things you're doing. And it's, again, another great way to support the site. Hopefully something can help you with your studies too. I spent a lot of time making sure these questions felt like, sounded like, had the same experience as an actual exam. It's got the same question distribution as an actual exam. It's as close as you can get to an actual CompTIA exam without it being actual CompTIA exam questions. Because each one of these questions is unique, original, and I wrote them all myself, then you know you're getting something that was really designed to have that feel of an actual exam. Speaking of actual exams, let's go back and do some more. I've got plenty of questions for us to go through today. But again, if you want to learn more about that, professormesser.com/core1pe, CORE1PE for Core 1 practice exams. Let's do another question. This one, we might even learn something on this one. This one asks the question, what method does ECC memory use to detect errors? What method does ECC memory use to detect errors? Is it a look-ahead cache? Is it parity bits? Is it redundant data? Is it checksums? Or is it proxies? What method does ECC memory use to detect errors? Is it a look-ahead cache, parity bits, redundant data, checksums, or proxies? If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in your answer right there. Figure out the details of this. ECC memory. We don't run into that very often unless you have something like maybe you have a server of some kind. I guess that would be a place where you would see ECC memory. We don't see it on our laptops. We don't see it on our desktops. It's not something we run into a lot with these. So ECC memory. Think about that one. Each one of those answers here could be any one of those to have this here. Hopefully it's one you can break down and figure out. Maybe you're able to throw out a couple and now you're getting down to 1 or 2 or 3 of them that you can focus on it. This is one where you do have to understand how this technology works. Another good example of how knowing what ECC means doesn't necessarily help you understand how ECC works. So it's another one of those. This is a common theme on the exam. I'm not just making up the way that I like to ask questions. I'm writing questions here very similar to the way you would see them on the exam, albeit a little bit shorter. At least takes you through that process, the mind process of what they want from you when you sit down for the exam. It's not going to be a trivia exam. It's going to be one that really asks, do you understand about how this works? There are some desktops out there that do support ECC memory. You just don't see them very often. And how many times would you need one for a desktop PC anyway? But of course, as many times we take these desktop motherboards and we use them in servers, which I'm doing for my streaming server. So you never know. There's all kinds of different use cases for these and being able to work through all of those. But if you're working on the server side, you're server administrator, you're working with other operating systems, you'll certainly run into motherboards that can support the use of ECC memory to be able to have those. Let's see how you did with this one. Let's go back to the question that asked, what method does ECC memory use to detect errors? Is it a look-ahead cache? Is it parity bits? Is it redundant data? Is it checksums? Or is it proxies? How did you answer? Well, 59% of you, which is a pretty good majority, say it's parity bits. But 22% of you, that's a healthy number, say that it's checksums is how you would use it. Another double digits, 10% say it's redundant data that will help ECC memory detect errors. 6% of you said it's a look-ahead cache, and only 2% of you said it's proxies. So what would we use for ECC memory? We would use parity bits. This is how both ECC memory and parity memory, both of those, use parity. In fact, RAID uses parity to be able to provide redundancy. This is how it does it. So normally in memory, you have 8 bits to a byte. We learned that very early on in figuring this out. So a byte, which is usually like a character of memory, that is 8 bits. Now, how do you get some ability to find errors by simply adding on another bit? Well, the way you do it is you create something called even parity. And what you want to do is for all the ones in these 8 bits to be even. And if it is not even, we make it even by adding that extra bit at the end. For example, in this first byte of memory, this first 8 bits of memory, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ones in that byte, which means it's already even. So in my parity bit, I'm going to put a 0. Now, if this memory shows up, if I'm storing this data, if I pull this data out of memory and suddenly there's an extra 1 in here somewhere, then that parity is not going to match. And that's how we know that there was some type of corruption or some type of error. Let's do another one. I have another byte down here, 00000010. Well, that's only 1. I count 1 1 in that byte. That's odd. So to make it even in the parity bit, I make the parity bit a 1. Now it's even. And if I pull this data out of memory at some other time and I look at this and suddenly the number of ones is odd, then I know something went wrong somewhere. And lastly is 1001, 1000. Well, if I count up the number of ones, 1, 2, 3 number ones in that byte, that's odd. I need an extra 1 to make it even parity, and I add it to the parity bit. That's how parity works. Not very complicated, is it? It's not a checksum where there would have to be some type of calculation. You don't have time to make a calculation. When you're dealing with memory, you need something very easy to be able to do that. But if you're dealing with anything that talks about parity, whether it's parity memory, ECC memory, a lot of you in the chat room talking about RAID. RAID uses parity. This is how it uses parity to be able to do that. It's very fast. It's very effective. It can't necessarily tell you where the error occurred, but it does help you understand if an error happens. And sometimes that's really important at a bare minimum to know, wait, something went wrong, to be able to have that there. So for those of you that answered parity bits, you were absolutely correct with that. That's exactly what we were looking for. It would not be a look-ahead cache. Look-ahead cache helps you speed things up, but it doesn't tell you or help you understand if any of that data has been corrupted or changed in any way. Redundant data would be nice, but can you imagine duplicating the amount of memory you would have to have in a computer to be able to do that? It would have to be completely redundant. I'm already spending enough on memory. You want me to spend twice as much on memory? That seems like a lot. So let's not get redundant memory to be able to do that. Checksums, as I mentioned, is a calculation that takes place that allows you to see if a particular area of data has been changed. Checksums, because there is a calculation, there's an algorithm that takes place. That's a lot of overhead to be able to calculate that checksum, and to be able to do it with memory in real time. It's not something we really want to waste time on. Our memory needs to be faster, not slower. And lastly, proxies. Proxies is when a device is asking for something on your behalf. Proxies are awful for speed. They slow everything down. They'll slow down your network. So they'll absolutely slow down your memory. You will not want to have memory running proxies. The only answer here that makes any sense is going to be your parity bits. 60% of you got parity bits. You are absolutely correct. That is how you do it. We got time for another multiple choice, right? Let's do another question. I have one for you. This question asks, a company uses an email system that is hosted in the cloud and managed by a third party. Which of the following would best describe this model? Would it be IaaS? Would it be private? Would it be PaaS? Would it be hybrid? Or would it be SaaS? I think all of those are legitimately a good way to explain those. A company uses an email system that is hosted in the cloud and managed by a third party. Which of the following would best describe this model? Is it IaaS? Is it private? Is it PaaS? Is it hybrid? Is it SaaS? Oh, those cloud computing questions. If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer at professormester.com/QA. Please, no answers in the chat room. No hints in the chat room, but you can commiserate in the chat room at how much you hate cloud computing. It just happens to be that's everything we do now is cloud computing. There's so much we do with cloud computing. It's now not only what we do today, it's clearly the way we're going to be deploying applications for the foreseeable future. It is so efficient and so effective and so quick to change. Sometimes miss the old days as well. To have all of that. One of those you think may be able to figure these out, though. This one not too bad. Fortunately, the cloud computing technologies that are in the 1001 exam, not horrible. Very broad, very common to know to have all of these things here. Be able to break these down. Hopefully you'll be able to break this one down too. In fact, you might use this model. A company uses an email system hosted in the cloud and managed by a third party. Well, that's pretty common. Maybe you would be familiar with this. We'll have to see how this works to have all of those things there. You know, this is the problem, and I wouldn't say a problem, but something you have to consider. When you start working through these technologies and understanding more about them, especially this particular kind of one, just because we're doing cloud computing doesn't mean we're getting rid of something else. I remember when the iPad came out, everybody made fun of the name. It suddenly sold like gangbusters and everybody had a tablet. They immediately said, well, that's it for PCs. We're never going to be working with PCs again. PCs are going away. Your desktops and laptops, will never see them ever again. Why would anybody ever want to get into a job where you worked with laptops and desktop computers? They're clearly going to disappear immediately. And then what happened? We sold more of them. The whole industry decided, what? No, we're not going to move to tablets. Who made that up? The people in the industry magazines made that up, and the people at the industry chat rooms made that up based on absolutely nothing to have that there. So that's one of those cases where cloud computing is here. Trust me, there's going to be plenty of networking and plenty of databases and plenty of data centers and plenty of servers and plenty of operating systems to continue to work with. I assure you, if anything, there will be more of them, which is just great for us. Yes, yes, yes. And that's one of the big reasons I do this. Let's see how you did with this. The question asked, a company uses an email system hosted in the cloud managed by a third party. Describes my email system. Which of the following would best describe this model? How did you do? 59% of you say it's SaaS, SaaS. 12% or 19% of you said it's PaaS, platform as a service. 12% said it's IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. 4% said private. 6% said hybrid. So single digits for hybrid and single digits for private. Definitely not one of those. The real key to this question is it's asking hosted in the cloud, managed by a third party, and that's all you know about it. It doesn't say that you're developing it. It doesn't say that you're responsible for it. In fact, it specifically says you are not responsible for it, that you are, as a third party that handles it, you're hands off. You have no control over this particular system. That very clearly describes a service that is just software, that you just log in and use it. It's software as a service, everybody, SaaS or SaaS. This is another term for this is on-demand software. It's when you simply have a login screen, you log in and you use it. So if you're somebody who handles billing, but you don't want to have your own billing server, your own invoicing system, just want to go to an online system, type in, please bill this person. It sends them out a bill. That's a great way to do it. I think that's an exceptional way to do it, to have this here. So hopefully you'd be familiar working with these. The on-demand process of this is very nice. It's also very centralized because it's in the cloud. Very easy to work with. Of course, that means all your data is there. So I have a web-based email I use here at Professor Messer. I don't have a separate email server that I keep here. I don't have an separate email process I have to manage or a separate email software I have to upgrade and deal with operating system patches and deal with the email nonsense. I have third party handle that. I just log in and there's my email, which is exactly how I want it most of the time. Most of the time it's good. Good example of this is Yahoo Mail, Google Mail, Hotmail, Outlook Mail. Those are all software as a service to be able to have that there. Now, the fact that it's me logging in and everything is there all ready to go, I didn't have to program it or do everything, is what makes it software as a service. In fact, they could bill me for this. A good example is Microsoft has Outlook 365, where you would use their email service online, but you have to pay for it. Still software as a service. Platform as a service, if we were to choose that option, because 19% of you did choose platform as a service, means that we have to build it ourselves. They give us a platform for it, but we have to put together all the building blocks. We have to effectively program it ourselves. Anybody programming Google Mail? Nope. Anybody programming Outlook 365? Nope. So that's software as a service. That's the big difference between those two. So if you're getting to a product where you are putting together the building blocks and building out exactly the way you would like, that's platform as a service. So those are the big differences there. It's not about how much you pay for it. It's how you use it to be able to get all of those things there. If you did answer E, software as a service, that's right. You know then why that's not platform as a service. IaaS, infrastructure as a service, sometimes called hardware as a service, is if they just gave us a computer. They gave us RAM, a CPU, some the network connection, and some storage, and said, go. That's all you get. You don't even get an operating system. There's no software there at all. You're not even at the point where you could build your own software. You'd have to load an operating system. You would then have to load the software you're working with, or load the operating system and the software you're going to build, and build it all from scratch. All they basically gave you was the core guts of a computer that you have to build out from there. That is infrastructure as a service. And then the private and hybrid describe how the service is being used. If all of those things that you're using on that cloud-based service are internal to your company, it's a private cloud. If it's one where some of it is private and some of it's publicly accessible, then it's a hybrid. Got a little of both of those in there to be able to work through it. And that's why in this case, the only possible answer here is software as a service, or SaaS. I think we got time for one more. Fit another question in here to be able to get this through. Let's do that. Let's get this next question in. Like a troubleshooting question? I think we should. This question asks, a technician is troubleshooting a problem with a blank video display, and they've decided on a course of action that may resolve the issue. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Would it be to document the findings, verify full system functionality, implement a plan of action, identify the problem, or test the theory? The question again, a technician is troubleshooting a problem with a blank video display, and they've decided on a course of action that may resolve the issue. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Would it be document the findings, verify full system functionality, implement a plan of action, identify the problem, or test the theory? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. How much do you remember about your troubleshooting steps? This is one of those you need to know. Troubleshooting, I found people approach troubleshooting in a lot of different ways. And having a set type of flowchart steps to go through can greatly simplify and shorten the amount of time it takes to troubleshoot. It's remarkable when their problem will crop up. Somebody says, my computer's acting slow. You need to upgrade the BIOS. Wait, how'd you get to upgrade the BIOS from somebody with a slow computer? There's a whole bunch of steps in the middle. You can't just throw out things. I guess you could throw out things. You may be there a while. The point is that you do not need to throw things out. So there are a set of steps that everyone should really consider using to be able to perform a logical breakdown of troubleshooting problems like this. And that's how you would do it. So this is one also, I think this is a pretty good exam question. I've written a lot of exam questions lately. This one sounds like an exam question. So if you're looking at this and going, that's weird, that sounds weird, you wrote that funny. Well, yes, sorta. A lot of times you'll see me writing things funny like this, I guess. I don't think this is too funny. You'll see me writing things in a particular way. And I write them in this particular way because CompTIA writes them in this way. I would have probably written the question in a different way. Or it might be just as bad as this. I don't know. It's not that bad. I think you can follow through what's being asked, but there's very specific cues and clues in that particular question that you can break down. Hopefully you can see that. My point with this, though, is not to explain that I am a bad question writer. It is instead to explain why I am a bad question writer, which I think is the important part, right? To understand the way it goes. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a technician is troubleshooting a problem with a blank video display, and they have decided on a course of action that may resolve the issue. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Would it be document the findings, verify full system functionality, implement a plan of action, identify the problem, or test the theory? And 46% of you say test the theory, almost the majority. We'll go with the majority on that. We'll go with 50%. 28% of you say you should implement a plan of action. 12% said you should identify the problem. 9% said you should verify full system functionality, and 5% said document the findings. Now, if you work through this and figuring out the details of this, of where you would go to be able to work with all of these things, this is where you go, is the spreadsheet of things. You can't see because I got my big head in the display there. So I'm going to take my head out of the picture. There we go. So this is the process that CompTIA has in their exam objectives. And I put it into kind of a flowchart form. They just have it listed out in the exam objectives. But you identify the problem first of all. You can't do anything unless you know what the problem is. You establish a theory, and then you test that theory. At that point, you realize, did it fix it? Did it not fix it? If the theory works, then we can start figuring out a way to plan out how we would implement it, and then finally implement the plan and test that it's working before we finally document what it is doing. So the key here was that we were troubleshooting a problem with a blank video display. We had already identified the problem. It's a blank video display. I think we can clearly see that's the issue. And the question says, we've decided on a course of action that may resolve the issue. We've established a theory of why we think the screen is blank. So then the question then asks, which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? There's only one next troubleshooting step. Let's see if what we think the problem is really what the problem is. So the answer here would be to test the theory. That would be the best way to do this. And that's why if you answered E, test the theory, 47% of you got that one absolutely right. This spreadsheet does come from my videos, by the way. It's the section 5.1. It's a video called How to Troubleshoot. How to Troubleshoot. Go through the whole spreadsheet and figure out the details of that. Now, why wouldn't it be one of these others? We've got other things here. How about implement a plan of action? Well, you aren't actually sure that your theory fixes it yet. why would you begin going through the process of implementing the plan of action? Now, in our house, if we think we know what the problem is, I think I might be a BIOS upgrade. We'll just upgrade the BIOS. Now, if you're working in a corporate environment, you can't touch that machine. You have to go to the change control committee and explain to them, yeah, we're going to update the BIOS. They're going to say, well, going to bring that machine down and update the BIOS. Why? Why are you doing that? I think it might be it. Well, did you test it in the lab? Do you know that that's it? No, I haven't tested it. Why would I test it? Of course, they're not going to allow that. So there's no way you jump from, I think I know what it is, to here's how, let's implement the problem. There's a whole set of things you have to verify and make sure are going to work. When you make this change, is it going to break anything? You haven't even tested it yet. That's another important part of the change control process. So it would not be what we would do would be to implement a plan of action quite yet. We're a little ahead of the curve on that one. 12% of you said identify the problem. Well, we already knew what the problem was. In fact, it says we are troubleshooting a problem with a blank video display. So we already know what the problem is. That's the very first thing we figured out. If we're at this point, we don't know the problem, we're in big trouble to be able to have that there. Let's try another one. We had 9% of you said to verify full system functionality. Well, we'd only be able to do that if it was actually functional. If the screen was finally working. We're not even there at that point to have that capability. And then lastly, document the findings. There's nothing to document yet. We have not figured it out what we're doing for these things. So that's why the only answer here, the best next troubleshooting step, not just the next one, but the best next one, is really to test our theory. Did we get the idea? Do we think we know why? I think it's a bad cable. There's our theory. Is it a bad cable? Well, we got to test it and find out. Let's change the cable out, see if it does the same thing. Did that fix it or not? Didn't fix it. Okay. Maybe it's the driver. Let's see what's going on with the driver. Should we update the driver? Should we downgrade the driver? Should we add a new driver? What do we do? Did that fix it? So we have to go through that process first thing to be able to have that. Pretty important to have those functionalities there. We have to know and perform those tests. So in this case, testing the theory would be not only the next thing you would do in troubleshooting, it really is the best next thing that you would do in your troubleshooting works. So that would be to be able to have all of those things there. All the questions we talked about in this hour come from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you do not have your hands on these objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice. They will tell you everything you need to know for the exam. They are comprehensive. They are an amazing checklist. And if you're trying to figure out if you're ready to take the exam or not, this will tell you, and it's free to download directly from the CompTIA website. I have a link that will take you over to the CompTIA website. You go to professormesser.com/objectives, and you'll be able to grab that. Download it directly from CompTIA. I do one of these study groups every month. We have an entire hour of Q&A in that first hour, and then I do more Q&A in the second hour, except you're asking me questions in the second hour. Today is July the 7th of 2020. We do one on July the 9th. So 2 days from now, we'll do the 1002 A+ study group. And if you're missed all of those and we're into August, our next August A+ study groups are on the 4th and the 6th. We have a Network Plus study group on August 12th and a Security Plus study group on August the 19th. If you're ever trying to figure out when the next live event is going to be, you can always find out on my website. Go to professormesser.com/calendar. We'll tell you when the next live event is going to be right there. You'll know when when I have to turn on the lights and push the screens back and get the whole, it takes me about an hour to get everything set up and tested in here. That's when I know I have to get something done around here because you're going to see it straight up. Well, we've come to the end of me asking you questions, but it really isn't over. I have another hour where I'm just going to stick around. We'll just answer your questions. So I'm going to turn the boat around a little bit. I'm going to open up the phone lines. I'm going to take questions from the chat room, and we're going to have you ask me questions. And they can be about anything. They can be about the A+. They can be about technology. They can be about career. They can be about what I'm playing on the Xbox right now. It doesn't matter. The answer is not much because I'm writing this book. That's how it works out for me. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams and success bundle. You can find it on the website at professormesser.com/1001success. And of course, don't forget about the free stuff, free questions on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, free videos on YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube, free questions and answers on Instagram, professormesser.com/Instagram, and about, of course, the one on Amazon. For those of you, by the way, in this first hour that are following us to get that continuing education unit credit, which the chat room's reminding me, hey, you forgot to give us a code in the thing. Well, let's do that right now. If you're somebody who's watching this for continuing education unit credit, you can get that CEU email from me by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Make sure you follow this. If you don't follow this process, you will not get the credit. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, there is, ask you for your name, ask you for your email address. Make sure that's right, because I'll be emailing this to you. See how that works? There's a subject line. In that subject line, if you could put, this is the July 2020 Core 1 study group. And on a single line by itself in that body of that message, put the super secret code word of implement. What a hard word to figure out. Implement. That's what we want to do. That's our super secret code word of the month is implement. See, I went a little off the base there. We didn't take it from the right answer. Implement is the super secret code word of the month. Send that to me. You can put anything else in there you'd like as well on the other lines in that body of message. I do read through every single one of these you send me. I'm not always able to respond back to them, but you're welcome to put any text in there that you would like. Implement is your super secret code word of the month, and that will earn you a continuing education unit credit. It takes me about a week to turn these around and get them back to you. Usually do it on the weekends. If you need it faster, if this is urgent and you need that CEU quickly, just tell me. Put it in the email, and I can get it sent back to you very quickly. Well, that brings us to the end of an hour of Q&A. Now we're going to do another hour. I've got plenty more to go through. Stick around for the after show. Thanks for joining us on this first part, and we will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everyone. Let's see if I can get things set up on my side. There we go. So that you can call in if you want to, and I'll give you instructions. I'm also watching the chat room as it's going by to be able to do that. The thing I send you back, the certificate is the email. It's an email. It just says, this certifies that. That's the certification. There is an attachment on it that's a digital signature. So if you wanted to use PGP or GPG and verify that nobody changed the email, you can do that. But if you don't want it to, then you don't need to. That's what that attachment is that you'll get. Is I digitally sign the email. That's what's there. Let me get this set up so that you can call in, because I'm talking too much and not able to do two things at one time. So let me start my show up. On my side, I'm using a cloud-based call-in system. It's on the cloud. It's software as a service, everybody. That's where that comes from. Let's also now have me call into my own show, because it's in the cloud, and I can't do that unless I do that.
Thank you for calling.
Okay. All right.
Please enter your show number.
I'm going to enter my show number, and then the thing says,
enter your 6-digit PIN.
Oh, see, I changed it. That was my first time using it with the 6-digit PIN.
Welcome, Professor Messer.
Oh, it even says my name. Well, thank you. Nice lady. Nice lady that's in the computer. Now, I've got this set up so that you can call in. There it is. There's the number. So if you wanted to call in, this is how some of us use it on a telephone with voice communication. In the continental United States, you can call in on this 800 number, toll-free, 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies is 855-785-7545. If you're outside of the continental United States, you can still call in for free by using Skype, because Skype will allow you to call toll-free numbers without requiring any Skype minutes. And you can do that by calling in. Just put a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-RJ45, +1 855-785-7545. Be a great way to pull up and call in for those as well. So in the chat room, people talking about taking the exam online. And there are some significant advantages to taking the exams online. There are some significant disadvantages to taking the exams online. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in doing that, that you read through some of the good experiences people have had and some of the horrible experiences people have had by taking these exams online. Best place to go and read about those stories is probably the CompTIA subreddit. Go to reddit.com/r/CompTIA. There have been some ridiculous stories and the things you can do and the things you can't do. If somebody you're in there and somebody barges into the room and immediately, oops, sorry, and they close the door on the way out, you just failed. If there's a lot of noise, somebody's playing music in the background, you just failed. You don't get to take it again. There's no retakes. You just failed it. If you put your hand on your mouth, like, what's the answer? They send you a message on the screen. Remove your hand from your mouth. So I guess you just have to sit there. A lot of people use their hands to do subnetting. They'll calculate subnetting or they'll count on their hands. Nope, can't do that. Can't use your fingers to count with. All this. There's so many rules and regulations associated with that, some of which you'll get a warning for. Some of them you'll just get horrible failures for this. Nope, failed, click, you're done. Got to pay for it again. Somebody had their phone in the room. Somebody called the phone rang, fail. That's it. Sometimes people show up ready to take the exam. Nobody shows up from Pearson VUE. So there's no subnetting in A+, but you can take the Network Plus and other exams on there as well. But that's one of those things where an advantage to taking it at home, taking these exams at home, is a clear advantage for many of us, but there are stipulations with that. Going to a testing center is just so much easier, so remarkably easier to do this. So certainly where you would go for this to be able to work through it. That's sort of the quick answer to taking the exam. Should I take it at home? Should I not take it at home? My personal opinion is I'm going to go to the testing site every time if possible. A lot of you don't live in areas where you're near a testing site. The testing sites in your area may not be open. The testing sites are such a long way away. You can't get there. Maybe you don't have an easy way to get to testing sites. Obviously, taking it home would be a huge advantage. That makes sense for you. Please do that. And some people are having fantastic experiences taking it at home, just not everyone. So already put that in your mind. You're taking it at home, you're going to have to be patient. You may have to work through problems. The exam may hang up on your screen. You may have a situation where nobody shows up to start the exam. And you sit there for an hour waiting to start and nobody shows up. Now you have to call the support line. Just be ready. Don't be angry. You knew it was going to happen. You just set yourself up for failure. That's one of those things for those. Would it be a problem if you speak the questions aloud to yourself? Oh, yes, you will fail immediately if you talk the questions out loud. Yes, of course, you will fail your exam immediately. You cannot say anything. There cannot be any noise during the exam. They need to see your mouth the entire time. You can't even make your mouth move. Nope. That's it. So it may not be a good choice for you. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's talk to the 813 fellow Floridian. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
John Kemp, Tampa.
Hey, John from Tampa. What can we do for you, sir?
I was just curious on the 5 domains that make up this test. If you could just briefly go over what things you think CompTIA is gonna. I know all these tests are kind of like random. The questions are randomly put together, but what things do you think they would definitely hit in each of these 5 domains?
Well, let's kind of step through that. I think there's a good place to step through those. So I'm going to pull up on my screen the CompTIA exam objectives, which I told you a moment ago. You should have these things. They are incredibly valuable to have. The objectives themselves will tell you what and how much of these exams you're going to work through. So here are the exams for the Core 1, the 220, 1001. On the first page of these, as you step through it, I guess the second page, it tells you of the domains how much of the exam is coming from these domains. So the first domain's mobile devices, 14% of your exam. Networking, 20% of your exam. Hardware, 27% of your exam. Virtualization, cloud computing, it says only 12%, but there's not a lot of content there to be 12% of the exam, and yet it is. And lastly, hardware network troubleshooting, 27%. So Section 3 and Section 5 are clearly over 60%, almost 65% of the exam. That's a huge bunch. And then networking, 20%. So the mobile devices and cloud computing, virtualization kind of bring up the rear. Now, even then, that's just giving us a broad perspective. Let's take, for example, hardware, section 3. If I scroll forward to section 3, let's do this. So section 3, maybe we'll do 2 pages worth so we can really get an idea. Section 3 is 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6. Wait, we're not done. 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, and 3.11. That's a lot of sections for section 3. So of that section, according to CompTIA, 27% of the exam will be from those 11 different sections. That's a lot of content and being able to do that. Now, another example I gave was 12% was the virtualization was from domain 4. Domain 4, 4.1 and 4.2. See what I mean? What a difference in the size of those different domains. So are there certain topics in here that might show up more than other topics? Not really. Are there certain topics that will always appear in your exam? No, because it's all random. CompTIA has an enormous pool of questions, and when you sit down for your exam, it scrambles them up in the big lottery machine, in the big bingo machine, and it spits out the right set of questions that correlate to those very broad domains. And a lot of people say, gosh, got a lot of printer questions on my exam, which, shouldn't necessarily happen, but it's only section 311 that really goes into printing. But that's 27% of the exam, and the random number generator might pull more from 3.11 than it pulls from section 3.8, even though 3.8 may be even a little bit bigger than 3.11. You just run into these randomization problems where that could be what you get on your exam. But it's only going to be a certain percentage, and it's probably going to be more distributed than that on your exam most of the time. But occasionally you'll get some of those that kind of show up together on the exam and put things there. But there's not one thing I can point to say this will always be on the exam or this will not be on the exam. You just never know. You have to go through this list in the exam objectives. If you check it off and know it, then you're ready. A lot of people also tell me, hey, I took my exam. I got no questions on this thing. Like, well, yeah, that happens. It happens that there is a lot of stuff in the exam objectives, and you may not get a question about it on the exam. That's industry IT certification exams. That's normal for CompTIA, Microsoft, Cisco, VMware, Palo Alto Networks, everybody. So that's one of those situations where you just never know. The best thing I can tell you is make sure you know everything that's listed in the exam objectives. And if you know that, doesn't matter what distribution it is, doesn't matter what topic it is, doesn't matter how they ask the question, you already know it. So that's my recommendation for you. If you're trying to figure out where do I narrow my focus, you're thinking the wrong way. You should be broadening your focus, and it should be covering everything listed in this huge list of topics. That's tough to say because it is a big list of topics, but it's important to know all of those. You just never know what you're going to run into on the exams. Does that help, John?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Sure. Hopefully that will get you through. And maybe once you kind of break these things down, I think it's not as bad if you take a little chunk of time and get through the exam objectives. I think that's a great way to approach it.
Thanks.
Appreciate the call. That's one where if you're ever in a situation on your exam or you're trying to figure out where do I go further to really break down what is expected of me, it's always the exam objectives. I know all of you are tired of me saying this. Oh, it's the exam objective? Yes, it's the exam objectives. I say it over and over and over and over again. It's always the exam objectives. That's the situation you'll run into, is figuring out those. Do you need to know network cable speeds? If you have a question that says, do I need to know, then you need to go to the exam objectives. You go to this list. So network cables, cables don't have speeds. That's one thing that helps. But they may ask you questions about cables. For example, on the hardware section, they ask about Ethernet, Cat5, Cat5e, and Cat6. Well, they wouldn't be asking about those categories if they weren't wanting to know when would you use those Cat5, Cat5e, and Cat6? What makes them different? In which situations would you use one over the other? So obviously there's going to be some relationship between the physical cable and what you would put electrically on that physical cable. So that's one of those situations you'll run into. It's in the exam objectives. It's always in the exam objectives to have those things there. From the chat room, Professor Messer, are you planning to do any courses on CCNA, CCNP, or SySa? Well, all of those sound good to me. And all of those are I have a big list of things I want to do. All three of those are on my big list of things I want to do. I want to do a lot of things. So that's one of those situations. And from the chat room, people are saying, yes, but there's certain things that are included but not on the objectives. It doesn't matter. If it's not on the objectives, don't worry about it. If it's not on the objectives, don't worry about it. In fact, if it's not on the objectives, it's not covered on the exam. It's not included. So always go to the objectives. And I say this because there is a world of technology beyond these objectives. Nobody's saying there is not. There's plenty of things you're going to continue to learn after you get past your A+ certification. What I'm saying is to pass the exam, if you know everything that is listed in these exam objectives, you'll do fine on the exam. Doesn't matter what they ask. What if they ask a question that's somehow outside the scope of these exam objectives? They might. In fact, the exam objectives tell you that they might, but they don't. As for those of you that have taken the exam, they don't really deviate from these objectives. If you know everything in the objectives, you're going to be fine. Focus on the objectives. Have I said it enough yet? I think I have. I think I've made everybody sick of it. Let's not say it anymore. Instead, let's go to 804. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Neil Krause. I'm calling from Virginia.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I actually went through your whole course and I did the Take 10 challenge. I've been watching these study groups like in the live stream. This is the first time I actually caught one of yours on live. And I had a question because you had another guy who was talking about how with his job experience, he said all you need to do is have a goal. Well, looking at the CompTIA roadmap, there's so many things. I don't know what I want to do. Do I just jump around and see what I like?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where
well.
How are you supposed to make a goal if you don't know what there is once you get there? And it's one of the challenges of IT. It's so broad. There's so many things you could end up doing. And unless you know what those things are, how are you supposed to know that you can do it? This, by the way, not an IT thing. This is sort of a human nature thing. That how are you even supposed to know you're interested in that if you've never seen it before to know that you're interested in that? That's one of those things that is just great about IT, I think. And what usually happens is that most of the time people ask us very broad questions about our career. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Well, it really doesn't matter where I see myself in 5 years or 10 years because things are going to change with technology so much in the next 5 or 10 years that whatever I guess for myself in the next 5 or 10 years does not really matter because the world's going to be completely different. What I tell people is start working in IT. I think help desk is a great place to start. It's one of the places I started as a field tech. Really, I started in operations. I started in mainframe operations, if you really want to get down to this, when I was in college. But eventually I moved up to help desk, to a corporate help desk. And from the corporate help desk, I found that what I ended up doing is I worked a lot with operating systems. I worked a lot with networking. I worked a lot with other technologies, worked a lot with the mainframe. And I really found an interest and I don't know what I want to call it a passion, but certainly a huge interest in operating systems. Like, let's learn as much as we can about Windows. And I really dove into Windows, understood how it worked under the surface, understood what the DLLs were doing, understood how the structure of Windows worked, how you deploy it, how you manage it, how you control it, and really got into the details of that. And the folks in the desktop management group said, hey, guy on the help desk who knows Microsoft Windows really well, we have an opening over here. Would you be interested in just doing operating systems full time? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I would like to do. So very often it's what you end up doing determines where you are going next with that. And I think that's one of the best ways to make that happen is find the thing that interests you about the technologies you're working with and just dive into those technologies. And when I say dive into it, I don't mean take a passing interest in it. I mean learn everything you can about that technology. The more you learn about a single technology, the more valuable you are going to be for that person who's using that technology. So if you become the Windows expert in dealing with forest trusts in Active Directory, there's not a lot of people doing that. There's a group, and they know their stuff, but all the rest of us are kind of standing around outside going, how do you make that? How did that work? How do you answer questions about that thing? You'd have to have some experience with it and work with it and learn about it and dive into it. And that's the way you move up in the industry. What's also nice about this is, for my example, I really got really interested in desktop operating systems. I learned everything I could about Windows. I learned how to deploy it over the network. I learned all these things about it. And I started working with it and deploying it over the network so much that I ended up doing so much with the network that I became interested in the network side of things. And I thought, well, gosh, that's interesting, these things I'm doing on the network. How did that work actually when I deployed that over the network? I grabbed a sniffer and I started looking at the packets and realized, wait, there's a whole world of protocols and packets and traffic and IP addresses all happening on this wire that I had no idea was there. Whoa, let me jump into that. So I jumped into the network and became a network administrator and learned about switching and routing and wide area networks and high-speed networking and fiber connections. And that just took me to the next phase in my career. So it's really about what the next jump is going to be. It's very rarely about what's going to happen in 5 years. I'll go through 5 jobs in 5 years because I'm not a good person for picking out jobs, apparently. But in 5 years, I'll go through a couple of jobs. I very rarely stayed anywhere for 5 years. There of the 15 different positions I ever held in IT, and there were about 15, some of them within the same company, some I went to a different company. There were probably 2 of those where I stayed over 5 years. So that's a good example of how don't worry so much about what you don't know. Don't worry so much about where somebody thinks you want to be in the next 5 or 10 years. Figure out what you like to do now and just dive into it. Learn as much as you can, sponge off the people that know those things, and then start learning yourself and really grab those technologies. That's the best thing you can do in IT. It's one of the fastest ways to move up. And of course, it's one of the best ways to do what you want to do in IT. So a lot of people, I will talk to them and say, well, get a job working in the help desk. It's a great starting position in IT. And they say, well, it doesn't pay a lot, so I'm not interested. I'm like, that's not what the help desk is for. It's not to pay you for the rest of your career. It's to give you the experience you need to get into the job you want to have. And as we all know in IT, the 6-figure jobs are out there. All you have to do is now work yourself into those. And you got to start somewhere with it. I think the help desk is a great way to start with that. So that's sort of a roundabout answer to that, Neil. Hopefully that would help you.
Well, I appreciate it. Also, you're talking about with the CompTIA exam online or virtual.
Yeah.
And you talked about all these rules. Are these rules displayed on the website?
They are. They're very well documented. If you go to the CompTIA website and you say, I want to take my exam, they'll even say, well, do you want to take it in a testing center or do you want to take it online? You say, I want to take it online. And then they have a whole nother website you go to with a whole bunch of rules and regulations where they do describe all of this to you and tell you this is allowed, this is not allowed, this is allowed, this is not allowed. There's a lot of fine print. They make you agree to a lot of things before the exam starts. And there have been some very just crushing stories of people that said, I forgot to shut my door and my brother walked in, immediately saw we were on here. He turned around and left and closed the door. It was too late. The proctor said, failed, done. That was it. You'd have to pay again to take the exam. And he said, well, he was saying this doesn't seem fair. And people were going, well, you kind of agreed to it. It's literally written in the rules that can't happen. As trite as it seems to us, that's their rules with this. It is a testing situation. It is a clean room. Nothing can violate what's going on there. So that's those scenarios, but they do document everything there. So at least you will know or if you don't read it beforehand, you'll certainly be able to read through it afterwards that, oh, that's why they failed me, because I left my phone on and the phone rang. You don't want to be in that situation. So all of you, not just you on the phone, but everybody who is listening or watching this, make sure you read through the rules. Make sure you read through other people's experiences. You don't want to be in a situation where you failed the exam just because you forgot to lock a door, which sounds silly, but that's how it works.
That's great. You talked about last time. You talked about with the testing centers. How do you? I haven't looked yet, but how do you know if you have a testing center located nearby?
Oh, CompTIA does have a link to the Pearson VUE website where they have on the CompTIA websites, where can I take my test? You click on that and you put in a zip code and it'll show you exactly where the different testing centers are in your area. At that point, you probably have to do a little research to find out, are those testing centers open near me? There are testing centers that probably the ones in my area, I know at least one is closed, maybe two of them. So even if I wanted to take the exam right now, I could not, because those testing centers are not open, and I'm just not going to take it at home and deal with that because I don't have a time constraint. But if you did, you'd at least be able to figure that out. And you'd know, well, do I have one down the street? Is it an hour away? And then you can balance out from that whether you want to take it online or not.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I'll leave you to your next caller.
I'm glad you're able to make it live. Thanks for calling. It's one of those where I realize it's a balancing act. There may be situations I run into where I'm going to have to take it at my house and take it online. Well, that's just how it works to have these things here. They have a good set of things. Can I do this? Can I not do this? There's a big list of those on the CompTIA website. So can you use a trackpad? Can you use a wireless mouse? Yes, you can use a wireless mouse. You have to have a camera. You have to have a microphone. They have a whole set of things that are required and what you can and cannot use. For instance, you can use one monitor. You cannot use two monitors. You cannot even have that monitor plugged in. It has to be disconnected from your computer. So that's an odd rule, but that's a rule nonetheless. We'll go back to phones just a moment. Thank you for holding for so long. One of the questions here, I mentioned earlier that if it's not in the exam objectives, you don't need to know about it. And somebody in the chat room said, yeah, but I took a sample test online. I took a test online, and they talked about this thing that's not in the exam objectives. I would tell you that you should probably find a better set of questions. If you're answering questions about topics that are not in the exam objectives, these questions are not helping you. You need to find questions that have been written for the current version of the exam. I cannot express to you how important that is. It's a challenge, however. I know I said this when I was talking about my book. It is very self-serving for me to keep holding the book up like this and say, yes, you should consider getting this book. But the reason I wrote it is because there's some really bad questions out there that don't help you prepare for the exam. And if you're spending that much money and walking in the door, it just pains me to know if it's something that would really help. So one of the ways that you can tell, there's probably two good things you can use to tell if the questions you're using are good. One of them is, are the questions they're asking you, or the topics on these questions, topics that come from the exam objectives? Like the person who mentioned earlier, I got a question about Cat 3. It's not in the exam objectives. It's clearly not written in the exam objectives. Don't use those questions. That easy. Not just don't use that question, don't use that pool of questions, period. Because if one of them is bad, there's going to be plenty more that are bad. Another one is if it's a Q&A that's asking you trivia. How many pins are on a DDR4? Nobody cares. It's not even listed anywhere in the exam objectives how many pins that happens to be. What they want to know in the exam objectives is, when do you use a DDR4? What does it fit in? Where would you connect it? That's what they want to know. They don't want to know how many pins are on it. Nobody cares. If you have things asking you, what does HTTP stand for? Trivia question. Nobody cares. And you should not be using those questions like that. I've not looked at every possible set of questions on the internet, so I don't know about people asking me in the chat room, what about these set? What about that set? I don't know. I barely have time to do anything more than write my own questions. So those are the things I would immediately use. Those 2 rules I would use, and that could probably help you. Let's go back to the phone lines. You've been holding for so long. Thank you so much. The 818 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? Listen into the phone. And
Hi, my name is Sean Murray.
Hi, Sean. Which question?
Sorry, I was getting feedback from the YouTube. 1 second.
That's one of the things. If you're calling in, make sure you listen on the phone and not to the stream. There's a little bit of a delay.
Got it. My question is, I took the exam twice. I got a 618 the first time. I got a 655 the second time. I got some more material to study more. I've been using this is the first time I did it live. I've used a couple of your other live videos. My main question is, I've downloaded the objectives. I've taken extensive notes. I had taken also a 14-week course. I guess my question is, what is the best way to fully study other than obviously doing the objectives? My dad works at this cloud place for military that does works on the MQ9 and MQ11. His IT person said a lot of these questions are really about memorization. And what if someone's not like myself, not really that great at memorization? What would be, I guess, your best, way to study for it?
I don't think memorization is a good way to describe the exam, because a lot of people associate memorization with things that you could put on a flashcard. And I don't think the A+ certification or really any of the CompTIA exams are very flashcard enabled. They're not great flashcard exams because you've probably seen it already, having gone through the exam twice. I took one of my certification exams on network cabling, my CNX exam on network cabling. I took 3 times. And okay. The CompTIA exams are not good on flashcards. It's not like HTTP, and then you have to know what HTTP means, or HTTP port 80. That doesn't help on the exam, as you've probably seen, because you get questions a lot like the one I asked today, which was a client is sending email to an email server. What port number was that? Which is effectively what I was asking. It's kind of a 2-step process. First, I had to identify where a email client sending to an email server. What is that? And then you have to know, oh, wait, that's SMTP. Okay, SMTP, the port number is this. Then finally, you can kind of hit the memorization part of remembering what those things happen to be. So it's usually a 2, sometimes a 3-step process in these CompTIA questions, and they're never asked straight out what it happens to be. It's very often in a scenario. Jack works in the accounting department, and when he comes in on a Monday morning, his screen is black. The technician looks at Jack's computer and finds that CPU utilization is fine and memory is fine, and the cables are plugged in properly. What would be the best next troubleshooting step? Okay, there's a whole lot happening in that question. They've thrown around Jack's name like that's important, that he works in the accounting department, irrelevant. But they give you this kind of involved question about the scenario because it builds a story. And that's what the questions are about, is building the story. But it's up to you as the technician to be able to look at it and go, okay, it's not memory. They're not getting a utilization issue. It's a black screen. The next thing, I'd try to swap out the cable. Or I try to do, you find the thing with that. And in the answers, there's always going to be one answer that very obviously is the answer if you know what you're looking for. The other answers in there are going to be leading you off somewhere else. One is perform an operating system patch update. No, that's not it. Update the BIOS. No, it's the screen is black. Why am I updating the BIOS? Those things you should automatically be able to discard. Nope, yes. And it should jump out at you like that. But it requires you to kind of read through in your mind, figure out where those words are that they're looking for. There should be these words that jump out at you, and figuring out those details. What I would recommend is to find questions that have a similar feel to what's on the exam. It does not have to be my Q&A that I created in my book. There are others out there, and if you go out to the CompTIA subreddit and just ask people, what question pools did you find best represented the exam, they will tell you. And they'll give you lots of ideas, and they'll tell you the ones that definitely don't out there. So that may be the best way to do it, is just to get more Q&A, more time of hitting yourself with exam questions so that you get into the mode of understanding the meter, the style, the voice of the exam. And I think you'll find it makes it easier to read the exam once you sit down for it. Did you take the exam online, or did you take the exam at a testing center?
So I took it online. Reason being is with COVID-19, a lot of the testing centers near me, a lot of them are closed right now.
Right.
And they're starting to open up according to online with precautions and such. I lived in I read all, like I said, I read essentially all the rules and everything. And you're right. A lot of it is, first time I took it, I did have them talk to me because I was kind of reading out loud the question. Because it helps me to hear it.
Sure.
And I did. They were actually really nice about it. They just told me, hey, you can mouth it. We're not gonna ding you for mouthing it, but we can't hear you. So
Got it.
They were actually okay with you move. They were okay with you moving your lips, but you could not mouth it. And they gave me a warning. I didn't do it again. I just either read it in my mind or mouthed it, and I was fine. The second time I didn't have any issue. The only issue I had was I have a Service Pro 4. It's 5 years old. It's kind of, I think the Wi-Fi card, the internal Wi-Fi card is starting to go out because it's disconnected. It's disconnected actually a little bit during the test. On the second one, I was a little bit worried. But everything got recorded. So, and they reconnected out. I had to actually type to them, hey, are you guys having any connectivity issues on your side? Because I'm starting to have a little bit of a connectivity issues trying to reconnect. I'm wondering if it's your side. Can you tell me if it's your side? Because if not, I need to go check my router. Would that be okay? I asked because I read everything, like you said. It was
right.
I made sure to ask everything before I got up or anything to go check my modem or router. And it reconnected fine. It didn't do anything. It was for a second. So I actually bought my friend's Alienware laptop with actually a better hardware. No, it's about 4 years old too, but it's got better. I can replace stuff. So I'm probably going to use that this time for the third time, but I can't take it until at least the 16th anyways, because after the second attempt, you have to wait 14 days.
Yep.
So that does give me more time to study. I do have another question, but I would actually like to answer a question here in chat.
Sure.
Because I researched this. Someone's asked if they do accommodations. I tried because I do have AD and dyslexia. I could benefit from more time, but I don't. From what I saw and read, they make it kind of hard to get a little more accommodations to do it. You do have if you want to, you do have to send in all your paperwork, and they kind of make it hard. It's not easy to try and get the accommodations. It's kind of the same thing when I tried to become a police officer before and trying to get accommodations for the written test. You have to go through hoops. In my opinion, that's not that great, but you can get it, but it's going to take you a little while to probably get it. It depends on how long you have to take it. For me, I'm trying to get a job, obviously. I'm trying to get remote work. Some places are doing that now, and I'm wanting to pass this test. I took the first time during my course because I wanted to see what the questions look like. I kind of expected not to pass the first time just because even though I've been doing IT for a long time, I wanted to see what the format was.
Yeah.
I was hoping to pass it the first time, but I was told it's a very hard test, even though so I was disappointed, but the second time I wasn't as disappointed. I got closer. I went from 618 to 655, which I calculated. I missed by probably like one question or so. So now I'm like, all right, I just got to study and do it. So I appreciate all you're doing. And you could charge for all your videos, and it's very nice of you to do this. I did have a second question.
Sure.
Four port numbers. Because obviously there's no subnetting in that they ask you in A+.
Yep.
Networking they might, but 4 port numbers. I know. Because the reason I asked about port numbers is the 2 times I took it, 3 of the practical questions were the exact same, which was weird. But 3 of they were exact same. I remember it pretty well. One of them was
we can't say too much about what the questions were exactly.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot. You can't. Sorry, you can't say because of the terms and conditions you signed.
But
Or I
broad
could
topics,
disqualify from
broadly
taking it.
speaking, they covered obviously something relating to port numbers.
Yes. So what's the best, I guess, way? I started memorizing it, but because it was, what's the best way to kind of memorize about emailing and IMAP, POP, and SMTP? Obviously, POP3 and IMAP is incoming, SMTP is outgoing. But what's the best way to memorize, I guess, secure ports to kind of look at? Is it just reading it and kind of memorize it, or is there like a trick to memorizing the port numbers?
This is one of the few times on the exam where there is some rote memorization that has to take place, but it can't just be what the port number is and what the protocol is. And I've got up on the screen all of the ports and protocols you have to know for the exam. 21 is FTP, 22 is SSH, 23 is Telnet, 25 is SMTP. It's just a lot of them. And then they all start to run together after a while. HTTP, IMAP, POP3, it's just blinding with working with these. Now, for someone who's been in the industry for a while and you've set up a firewall to allow traffic through on a network before, or you've configured a personal firewall to allow remote control traffic with RDP, then these are things that kind of stick in your brain because you knew you had to set up a port forward on your local router to allow 3389 to come into your computer. And it kind of sticks in your brain because you did a lab or you had it in a real life scenario where you configured a firewall or a port forward to be able to allow that inbound traffic to your service. Those things really help if you do that. But a lot of us have never done that before. We've never been in a situation where we had to configure these from scratch or set them up in a firewall. And in those cases, it does become more of a rote memorization type scenario. And there's not any great ways to do it other than to use maybe a technique that you could use for, DNS is 53 and 53 was the number I wore on my jersey when I played football, and that was at something high school that had a DNS in it. Those things can be useful if you're can put some of those together in that type of scenario. Probably more important with these, and I stressed this earlier, it's important to know that 53 is used by DNS. It's more important to know what DNS is, and that eventually it comes back to 53 because your questions will have multiple steps in them that may ask you to configure a personal firewall to be able to allow or disallow traffic through, or ask you about someone who's done it. A network administrator set up a block for TCP 3389. Which of the following things now won't work? And they'll tell you email, web browsing, remote control, database updates, and then you have to choose the right one. And that doesn't mention RDP. It doesn't mention remote desktop. You kind of have to build out from that. So knowing the broad story is important.
One last question,
sure,
if I may. Great. I lost it. What? Wow, I lost it.
Well, if you think of it, you're in the chat room. I'm watching the chat room go by. Stick it in there, and hopefully I can see it as it
I'll
goes
stick it in the chat room. That way I don't take any more time up. But I'll stick in the chat room.
Best of luck, Sean. You're so
Thank
close
you so
to
much.
getting this. I think the next time through, you're going to do fine.
Oh, I just remembered it.
Okay.
Would it be fun? Would it be good for people? Like I'm going to do it anyways, just because I think it'll give me confidence to really boost to get to the past A+, because I know the IT fundamentals really, in long scheme of things, doesn't really matter as much. But for people because I've been doing computers for a long time, I have an AA and I took an A. I have now this was back in 2009, so a lot of things have changed. I have an AA in software engineering. I just actually never got into the job field right away, so that's why I'm doing all this to fully go back into it. But would it be fundamental for people? I'm just doing it just to give myself confidence so I can pass it. Because it's only 75 questions. There's no practical. It's just max 75 questions, 60 minutes. Would it be fundamental for people who haven't really had too much experience with, I guess, computers to take to get that certification?
I think A+ is perfectly accessible for anybody to learn and earn it without having practical experience in the industry. There's a number of people that come to my site that are not in IT. They don't have any IT experience, and they're starting with Security Plus because they're trying to get a job with the federal government, and especially the Department of Defense really wants people to have Security Plus, and they don't really care about the Network Plus and A Plus. It's just harder if you haven't put together your own computer before or worked inside of a computer before. Now you have to learn all those things. Whereas if you've put together your own computer system, or you've even installed an interface card, you've seen inside of there before. You've worked with the cables. You know how to plug it into the interface. A lot of those things are just second nature to you. But the folks that have never done that before, that's just more things they'll have to learn. It'll just extend the amount of time it takes to learn those particular things. But it's certainly accessible by everybody, I think.
Okay, so then, in your opinion, doing IT, doing the fundamentals isn't really needed to get the fundamentals certification then?
I don't think so. I think the IT fundamentals certification is one that's a very niche certification that's made for a specific group of folks that probably are not necessarily going to proceed into other parts of IT. It may be for other reasons, or it might be for people that really would like more fundamentals before they jump into A+. The problem is not a lot of employers are looking for the IT fundamentals, the ITF certification. And I think that's another big reason why people aren't taking it. It's almost a catch-22. They're not taking the IT fundamentals because employers aren't looking for it, but employers aren't looking for it because they don't know about it, and they don't know about it because nobody has it. So you're in this circle of things.
All right, so
everybody knows about the A+. That's
right,
the popular
yeah.
one, and it's a common place to start.
So I'm just doing it for weird reasons. I'm just doing it to boost my confidence in taking to pass A+, by passing A test.
I think at the end of it, you're also going to learn
so
something as well, which is also good.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor.
Absolutely. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. You're so close. I think the next step is going to be really bringing home that particular one, to be able to have that there. Let's go back to the phones. We can work through other parts of this. Folks been holding so long. Thank you so much. Caller 657. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
I think that's me.
Yeah, you're not. I thought you might have gone asleep. You might have lost us. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Devon. I'm calling from California.
California.
The
Okay.
last guy actually asked a question that I wanted to ask.
Well,
It's
you're
just
welcome
like
to ask.
I just needed to know what was the best way to study.
Yeah, the real question in there, and one of the things I often find is I study differently than I think other people study. Ironically, I like spending time reading a book and then watching videos. Ironic, because I'm the one making video series and not writing a lot of books around that, although it seems more and more books these days. I always tell people it's four things. So to take away, we really didn't talk about those four things on that last call, but it's four things. Get a good book, watch a video series, maybe more than one, get as much hands-on as possible, and that might be hands-on in a lab, or just maybe you working with your computer at the command prompt, and lastly, get as much Q&A as possible. Those are the four things that I think would maximize your ability to pass the exam. Can you get away with fewer than those four? Yes, you can. But I think if you wanted to have the best possible chance for passing your exam, get all four of those things. Because I think when you read it from a book, you're getting a different perspective than watching a video. And when you actually sit at a command prompt and you run these commands, you run the ping command, you run the dir command, you watch the results come up, you use those commands at a command prompt, it fires different synapses in your brain. It locks in that information in a different way. And that's why I tell people reading about it's interesting, watching somebody do it's interesting, but make sure you do it yourself to really bring it home, and then you can do the Q&A to see if you really remember it.
Okay. With that, I never took college courses or actually did any other studying after I got my high school diploma. So with this whole studying thing, how many hours a day should I be putting into study time?
Well, a lot of people like me don't have a lot of time during the day to study. It takes me months when I'm ready to finally sit down and make and actually take a certification exam. It takes me a long time. Other people they wake up in the morning, they study all day, the sun goes down, They go to sleep, they wake up the next day, and they keep doing it, and they can get through this in weeks. The real answer, though, is everybody studies at a different pace. Everybody comes into this with a different base of knowledge. Some people know a lot about technology. Some people know nothing about technology. The real answer is you study until you know everything that's listed in the exam objectives. If you can go through an objective, we'll take one. I have one on my screen. Explain common network configuration concepts. For IP addressing, I need to know static, dynamic, API-PA, and link local. If I can explain to someone else what static IP addressing is, what dynamic IP addressing is and how it's different than static, what API-PA addressing it is and when that would be used, and what link local addressing is and when that would be used, and I can tell someone else, I got that one down, I can check that off my list and go the next thing. That's how I, in my mind, summarize. I know enough to be able to move to the next step in this process, which for that particular topic will probably be taking some Q&A to see if I really remember what those things happen to be.
Okay, so one last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So with me getting into this, and I'm new at this, would it be smart for me to try to go get a job in a help desk? Like I heard you saying your first job was at a help desk.
Yeah.
Would it be smart for me to try to get that job now before I get the cert, or wait to get the cert for?
Oh, you should always get the job whenever you can. And this may be the question you ask the people hiring for the help desk. Ideally, what would you like me to have? This is one of those things where I tell people sometimes in your area where you happen to live, there are probably a number of companies or a number of places you've worked with or that are in your area that you know about. And you can go to their website or go to dice.com or your favorite, go to LinkedIn, find out where they're posting their job postings, see what they want. Are they asking specifically for the CompTIA A+, or are they just putting a broad setup there and saying, if you know anything about technology, we'd like to talk to you. Never put a resume in for a job that the client has a big list of things that they want to get from you. And don't think that you can't put in a resume for that. You should always be sending your job application in for the job you want, not for the job that you think they want to hire for. So if you think that the A+ certification will help you for this, and they're specifically asking you for this, and they want to see it on your resume, then maybe you don't send it in right now and you get that certification and then send it in to them. Or maybe they don't have anything on their website about it. Let's go ahead and get that job right now and put it in. And in fact, many times that's a great thing because every organization, especially large companies, want to have something they can see growth. They want to give you a set of tasks that they could see you excel at in your job and evaluate you on how that works. So a lot of people that get into a help desk, one of the first things the help desk manager will say, well, here in your first 6 months, we want to see you earn your A+ certification. And we'll give you tools to do that. We have training systems to do that. We've got people here that have taken it that you can talk to. And in 6 months, we want to see you with your A+. And they're going to see how you do. They're going to evaluate you. Do you earn it in 3 months? Does it take you all 6 months? Do you miss that and go 9 months? They're going to figure out, is this someone we're going to be able to move into somewhere else? Because they don't want you at the help desk forever. They want you learning as much as you can and then going into desktop administration, database administration, networking, security, whatever it is in your environment. Figure that part out. So they might be happy hiring you without it and then using that as a goal or a tool that they can use to evaluate you and then move somewhere else from there. That's a great approach I think a lot of companies use.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate the call. Whenever I start trying to figure out where to go from a certain place, when should I get that? Should I get that job? Of course you should get that job. Go get the job. In our industry, I mentioned this earlier, and if I know folks have been holding on the phones for some time, I'm coming to you next in 217. One of the things that I got in, the first job I had was the first job out of college, and I didn't get a technical degree. I worked for a computer store in South Miami. It was a computer store that happened to have the account for all of the county offices for Dade County. At the time was just Dade County. And So they sold thousands of computers a year, thousands of computers a year. And so I was the field engineer for those thousands of computers. There were sometimes two of us, sometimes one of me. And so I would go, and if there's something that needed to be installed, something that needed to be delivered, sometimes a cable wasn't delivered properly, I was the cable delivery guy. So you were kind of the grunt work. I was that field tech for about 9 months. That was it. After 9 months, I got a job working at an insurance company in town on their help desk. And so I stayed in that help desk role for a couple of years, I think. Now, it was a corporate help desk. This wasn't one where you just had the phone on and you didn't leave your desk and, hi, can I help you? What's your problem? Let me change your password. This is what a corporate help desk, you're wearing a tie. If somebody has a problem, you get up from your desk, you go over to their desk, you find out what's going on. It's a little bit different. And I stayed there a couple of years, but I moved from the help desk then moved into those different places. You're never staying in one place for very long. I think after a year and a half, I was already moving into the team that handled desktop administration, maybe 2 years. It was in desktop administration. From there, a couple years, and then I moved to a vendor, manufacturer that made protocol analysis tools. So you just move around constantly. I actually moved to networking next and then to the protocol analysis group. So it's one of those situations where I stayed at the insurance company for just over 5 years, but I had like 3 jobs. I did 3 very different things. You're never going to stay in one place for very long. Don't worry that I'm getting in the help desk. I wanted to be in security. Why couldn't I be in security? You will be in security, but you need to start in the help desk, and you're going to move up very, very fast. Nobody stays around in IT in one place for very long. You move very fast. If you have any interest and any get up and go at all, you're going to be moving quickly. Trust me. Back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long, 217. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Shannon from Illinois.
Thanks for calling. What's your question?
First-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, see, somebody had to do it. It was you.
Yep.
What can we do for
I
you?
got kind of a tricky question for you.
All right.
And that is, I've been job searching here, about to take the CompTIA exam, and I'm looking around my area. It's kind of the central Illinois area, and it's kind of difficult to find something to kind of get into, because what I'm asking is I'm transitioning from my current occupation into IT, and I'm trying to find something that's well-rounded and pays decently to be able to keep my current quality of life.
Right.
Standard of living, whatever you want to call it. And what are some job titles that would apply to that from, let's say, a student that's got the CompTIA certification and 6 years of like unofficial IT experience where like they helped around their workplace and they did their own stuff at home, and, just an associate in a completely different field? Like, what could they be looking at to help with their transition so it's not just a straight drop in pay and you're just starting at the bottom again?
That's probably the biggest hurdle for people that are moving from one industry into IT, and doesn't, not just into IT, but if you're moving from industry to industry, that's kind of your biggest hurdle. Is you kind of have to start, kind of drop down to the bottom, and you have to work yourself back up again. So your goal is not to drop all the way to the bottom, because when you drop to the bottom, you're right. If you spent 5 years in a sales role, now you're making a certain amount of money, and moving back to a not have that income coming in again is extremely difficult, and it's a common issue.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing you can do when you are making those moves from one industry into IT, there's really 2 places I would go. The 2 things I would focus on is if you have the ability to make this move and have it within your same vertical market. So, for example, if you were a police officer and you wanted to move into IT, your police officers, the police department has a big IT organization. They would love to have your knowledge in the IT organization at the police stations. So there may be a way to work. There may be a way to work that knowledge of the industry into something that's not starting at the bottom, that's at least starting a little further up the scale. And if you can even do it within your own organization, they may be able to work with you along those lines so that they're not bringing you all the way down the bottom because they already know you. They already know your work ethic. They already understand that you're knowledgeable in these things and that you're going to move up quickly. And they may even tell you, well, we can start you here, but when we move you up the next time, it's not going to be a huge jump in pay. It'll be back to where you were, or whatever it happens to be. There may be a way to work those angles. The other thing I tell people is this is the time where you take advantage of those industry relationships that you've created through the years, because everybody in every company has an IT department. And if you've made some relationships with people in your industry, if you work in a nursing or a medical field and you're a nurse and you want to go into IT, maybe the IT department in your hospital isn't hiring, but maybe the one across town is. And you know some people that work at that hospital. Now's the time to reach out to them and go, can you introduce me to the guys in your IT team and just let me send some messages back and forth, and maybe meet them for lunch one day in the cafeteria. It would be great. And they might be able to extend those conversations for you. We often don't talk about relationships and people networking enough in our particular field because everybody thinks we work with computers. We don't work with computers. We work with people who happen to own computers. So the more we can network and have those relationships and be able to ask for some favors, I think people are more than happy to give you the favor as long as you can ask them for it. And I think the job hunt is one that we all can feel for. We all can empathize with somebody who's trying to get that job. And if somebody called me and said, can you connect me up with the people you know in that particular place so I can do that? I go, absolutely. Let me send them an email right now while we're talking about it and have you guys talk about these things. More than happy to do it. And I think most people are.
Yeah, that's definitely the route I'm probably going to take with that. Because with using Indeed and trying to find some IT positions around this area, it's been, hey, we want 3 years already prior experience with, an official work record, not just doing temp IT for your company that doesn't have an IT department. And we also want a bachelor's on top of that, but we're going to pay you $13 to $15 an hour. And I'm sitting here like, for a bachelor's? That's crazy. Like, why are you asking for that?
Yeah, and most of the times those things don't make any sense whatsoever anyway. And that's why I tell people, always apply for the jobs you want, regardless of what they say the requirements are. But another good example there is if somebody you knew was part of that decision-making process and you walked in and said, I'm really interested in this job. And they go, well, we know you have the knowledge for this. You don't have to have 3 years of it. It's not like we make this and require that you have 3 exact years of experience in doing this kind of thing. We already know you have that level of knowledge, so you would therefore qualify. So not everyone locks themselves into these things. I've hired a lot of people that fell outside the scope of what the job description was, but I knew who they were, or somebody I knew who they were and said, you got to hire this guy because he knows his stuff. Okay, well, let's have a chat then. Even though you didn't match 2 or 3 things that were on here, let's find out the big picture and go from there. Now, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get into situations with government or with very stringent environments where there is some particular mandate that requires that you have to have this thing. And if you don't have that thing, they can't hire you. I get that. But it's pretty rare to run into that situation. Just reach out and try to find out as much as you can. If you have this on the long scale, if you have a lot of time to work on this, and we finally get back to having user group meetings, make sure you go to some of these user group meetings. Go to a Microsoft user group meeting. Go to a Cisco user group meeting. Meet these people so that when these situations come up, you can reach out to the people in the user group and go, hey, I was just looking at a job posting for the company you work at. Do you know who's handling that, or what do you know of it, or what do you think I should do to be able to fit best for that position? There's all kinds of connections we don't even think about that are there. And that's one of the best ways to do it, is to reach out to those people and have them start networking for you.
I gotcha. I'll go ahead and give that a shot then. And I thank you for your time and all that you do.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck. That's always a challenge, moving from industry to industry and making that work. I get a lot of emails about this. I'm a nurse and I want to go into IT. I'm a trucker and I want to go into IT. I'm a police officer. I want to go into IT. I'm a lawyer and I want to go into IT. Everybody has sort of looked around and said, all these IT people keep working through this whole situation where everybody else was shut down. I need a job where I keep working through a shutdown. And they're finally realizing this is a great place to be. I should do that. And they're sitting at home and they're working. And they've already decided they're not going back to the office. They're going to stay at home once everybody goes back to the office. It's a case for a lot of people who are in IT right now. Back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long. 614. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Is Ohio on the phone? You muted? Omio, Omayo, Columbus, Ohio. You're there. We're going to stick you back. Oh, I didn't. You know what? Columbus didn't hit the button right. Let's try that now. Hear the noises? See, there you are, Columbus. Oh, hi. What's your name?
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi. My name is Aaron. I'm from, of course, Columbus, Ohio.
There we go.
But I'm recently been taking classes at a place where they're teaching the CompTIA course, and
great.
It's all been virtual because of the COVID.
Right.
They had labs, on hands for the computers, but everything's been virtual. The problem that I'm having is I have a Chromebook. Now I'm able to, take the classes and do the labs and whatnot, but I've had trouble because I don't have a Windows command prompt. And of course, my machine doesn't support virtualization.
Right.
So I've been finding small workarounds in case anyone else out there has the same kind of scenario. But the course that I'm taking, we have labs. We can use a virtual machine through the course I'm taking, and then of course you can do command prompts and whatnot. I guess what I'm getting at is, if anyone's having trouble out there, there's always workarounds. You can find a way through it. Now, the small problem that I'm having is, of course, with no hands-on, it's hard for me to learn certain aspects of the trade. Now the problem, I don't know why, but I'm having a mental block on on exactly, how to set up like a small office, home office setup where to exactly put, the WAP. And some people say you need to put it high up in the room with no interference. Some people say you need to put it in the corner where it projects out. I just wanted to get your input on how how that should go. Should that go in the center of the room? I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to set it up.
Well, there's a couple of things you were talking about. The first one I think is a challenge, not just for people with Chromebooks, but if you're somebody who has maybe Mac OS as your primary desktop and you're needing some way to get access in Windows, there's a couple of things you can do. For somebody with a Chromebook, it's a little bit more complex, but not entirely more difficult. Microsoft does have a number of virtual machines that you can run in their Azure cloud, although in many cases it requires that you're running the Microsoft Edge browser. So this may not specifically apply to a Chromebook situation. In those scenarios, maybe something like Amazon and their virtual desktops that you can run in the Amazon cloud might be an option. You can use them for setting up a Windows desktop. You click a few buttons, you got a Windows desktop running. I show an example of that in one of my virtualization videos. And it's very easy to set up. You run a browser-based client. You connect to it inside of a browser. That may be an option to work as well. And it's either, it may be even free to use for a single person or for a limited amount of time, or at least very low cost to be able to do that. Another thing a lot of people consider, especially if they're running Linux or Mac OS or some type of operating system where you can run a virtualization client, is to go to modern.ie. That's modern.ie, modern.ie, as in the modern world. Okay. And they have, this is a Microsoft website. It's for developers, but it's also for you to be able to use in a lab. They have a tools pull-down menu under reference. And in the tools are virtual machines for legacy testing. You can download Windows 10 with Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer 11, but the important thing there is Windows 10. And as long as you are using this for non-production purposes, which I would think most of us would be doing, we're using it in a laptop environment, you can download this for VirtualBox, Vagrant, Hyper-V, VMware, and Parallels And this is a
Hyper-V, that's great.
Okay, yeah, Hyper-V is free. You can run VMware Workstation for free, and VirtualBox is free. And those you can download the entire VM. It is a fully featured running 90-day version of Windows. So you can run this and have all the Windows available to you. You don't have to buy a license. There's no licensing process. You don't have to register. You don't have to give them any information. They don't need a credit card. You just download the VM and you can use it. And it's absolutely free. And it works like a champ.
Great.
They've been doing it for years. And it's a great way to get down to the Windows. You can break it. You can then roll it back to the previous config. It's a VM, so you can do anything you want. And it's not a sample of Windows. It's not a type of, it's a fully blown, fully featured version of Windows 10, and it runs great.
That's great.
And that is modern.ie. Most of the screenshots you see in my course probably came from one of these VMs. That's where you would go to use it. It's very easy to use. I've got other Windows things that I use here, but it's that modern.ie site that will redirect you over to that Microsoft developer site.
Awesome.
Maybe that will give you at least some options. That might help other people who are trying to work through challenges with finding the right thing to use if you don't have an operating system available. But that's you can't beat free.
No, you can't be free, exactly. And my other question was, when you're setting up like for a small office, home office, like for example, like let's say I had a small office in my other room. Like of course I want the WAV to be in that room. I suspect. I don't even know why I'm having such a mental block. I'm gaining a lot of knowledge in all the different types of the CompTIA training, but for some reason. I think it's just because I haven't had hands-on physically grab a modem or a wireless access point and set it up that I'm not too sure how to establish it. Because I'm looking at I do keep track of the Core 1 objectives, and that, like you said, the checklist down, that's great. So anyone listening, that's what you have to do. But I don't know why I'm having such a mental block on the small office, home office setup. I don't know why.
The access point is nothing more than a small little radio station. And if you're like me and you go back to listening to AM radio in your car, when you go under the overpass, you lose the channels. You go in the tunnel and you're no longer able to listen to the radio anymore. It's the same thing with these access points. If you get behind a metal filing cabinet and it's 5 gigahertz, you may not be able to talk to the access point much because you're blocking the signal. So getting up high on the ceiling allows the signal, especially with an antenna that's omnidirectional, kind of blankets the room without anything blocking the signal. In the case of 2.4 gigahertz, the signal tends to bounce around some more, so it could tolerate maybe even putting it lower down. In fact, most of us at home that are running a 2.4 gigahertz access point, then we know that we can put it just on a table and it pretty much covers, the part of the house that we happen to be in. But obviously the higher you get it, the broader it's going to be able to transmit. Maybe that makes sense for your environment. You may get a question like someone is in a conference room and they can't connect to the wireless network, the wireless access point's down the hall. What do? Well, you only have a couple of choices. You get out of your chair and you move closer, or you somehow get the access point moved closer to the conference room. It's not brain surgery. You got to figure out how you're going to get that radio closer to the radio transmitter. That's the real key.
Or a repeater, something like that,
I don't know that the exam goes too much into doing repeaters, but some people do have those in their house so that they're able to take the signal and repeat it off on a different set of frequencies to broaden that scope a little bit. That tends to slow things down a bit. Most people don't like to do it that way, but absolutely that's an option.
Now on the actual modems and the wireless access point, do they have a switch where you can change it from 5.5 gigahertz to 2.4 gigahertz?
It's usually in the configuration of the access point itself. If you go out to the Google machine and you type in access point emulator, there are tons of virtual web graphical user interfaces, many of them created by the manufacturers themselves, that will allow you to connect in and configure an access point as if you were working on the physical device. So if you're ever trying to figure out how let's configure this for WEP Let's configure it for WPA2. What does it ask me whenever I configure those things? What are the different options available? What are the different passwords they use here? Do they even tell me? Maybe I can just log in. Do I just click log in? No, it doesn't tell me. So but there's a ton of websites with these emulators on there, and you'll be able to run through them and configure, change, modify, see what option, when you turn one thing off, does it affect the other options that are available? You'll be able to do that by going through the emulators.
Very good. That's all I had. I just appreciate your time and what you put together for everyone. Because we take the class, and you'd be surprised how many times they refer us to your videos. It's amazing.
Well, it's great.
So I appreciate you and your time, and I hope my question may have helped someone else.
I hope so too. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. I got in by using admin for the username and password. I'll go to network. Here's the network settings. Here's operation mode. Do I use it as a wireless? There's WPS. We talk about there's the pin for WPS on the sample system. That 8-digit personal identification number for WPS on this device. You're not going to see this on a normal device, which is 1234567 And you get an option there to disable it on that wireless access point so that people can't use the PIN number. Let's generate a new one. Does it generate a new one? No, it's just an emulator. Security, different options for security. Where's the wireless? There it is. Wireless. There's the SSID information. The key type that we're going to use, are we going to use WEP? Are we going to use WPA or WPA2? And it says WPA2 PSK. What is that? Well, go back to your notes, and that's a pre-shared key. So you can actually see these things working in the emulator. Access point emulator is what got me to the TP-Link website where I just ran. There's tons of them out there, just tons to go through. If you want some hands-on labs for free, there's a good way to do it right there. Back to the phones. We're going to go back to the 48. I know we're in overtime now, to the 484 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. What's your name?
My name is Omar. I'm calling from Finland. Actually, it's my first time calling.
Oh, thanks for calling. What's your question?
Yes, I was thinking, because basically I work in IT support at the moment.
Great.
But I'm looking to move up to security, into security and all that. So I was thinking, is it better to go for the Security Plus or just go for CompTIA A Plus, or what's your best bet?
Well, you're already in a support role, so A Plus probably is not going to give you a ton of options unless you plan on leaving the organization you're in and you're going somewhere where they would like you to have that particular certification in your list of things. But you already mentioned wanting to go into security. The one thing I tell people, and I think it's really important, and we almost miss it sometimes, is that in IT security, you need a broad and very detailed understanding of networking. IT security has tons of networking that you have to understand. Just constant, not just IP addressing and how to plug things in. There's a whole set of knowledges in understanding routing and switching and dynamic routing protocols and network address translations. And on top of that, you layer on the security technologies. But you have to know how the networking works underneath to be able to get there. So there are some organizations that have entry-level security positions, but there's not a lot of those relative to all of the other positions you would have in IT. So I tell people, if you're looking to get into IT security, and that's usually a process that takes a number of years to finally get to that level, I tell people, get as much networking knowledge as you can. Go get your Network Plus. Go get your CCNA. Go get a CCNP. Go get as much network administration experience as you can, because that's what's going to enable you to leverage that knowledge and get into the security roles. I think more than anything, that's what's going to help you the most. And the networking part I find fascinating, and I think it enables you not just to get into a security role, it actually leverages you into a whole nother field, a whole nother set of fields in IT. It's a very enabling role. You can bounce out of networking and almost do anything in IT.
Okay. So basically, I actually did some research, and the CCNA was something I'm about to look into. Yes. Would you say go for the CCNA and then CCNP, or should I go for the Network Plus and CCNA, or what do you think? Is it better to go for both or just one?
I think it probably depends on your knowledge base for networking. A lot of people try to compare Network Plus and the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, the CCNA. Those are not comparable at all. Network Plus, absolutely an entry-level certification that gives you a broad understanding of networking. CCNA is not an entry-level certification. You're learning a detailed knowledge of networking down to configuring it on routers, switches, and setting up network configurations with multiple pieces of equipment. It's a more advanced certification. A lot of the information that you learn in Network Plus is also covered in the CCNA. Some of it is not covered in the CCNA, though. You can't do everything. CCNA can't be everything for everybody. But if you're somebody who already has a knowledge of networking, you've worked with some switching and routing in the past, or you're at least very familiar with networks and protocols, and you really feel like your direction is going to be towards security or towards network administration or routing and switching or network management, then CCNA might be a good place to start with the knowledge that you're going to have to now learn all the things that you don't know that you could have learned by taking the Network Plus. A lot of people prefer taking Network Plus so they can get the fundamentals down. So by the time they jump into the CCNA, they can really focus on the Cisco part of it. They don't have to worry so much about what is Ethernet, how do you plug it in, what is a dynamic routing protocol. Those types of things we already covered. So you can really focus more on the Cisco commands, the troubleshooting process, how to configure a switch, how to configure a router, how to set them up for what you want them to do. And so your approach is a little bit different from that perspective. I think those are the great ways to kind of focus on, should I take Network Plus or should I take CCNA? Depends on what you want to do, depends on what you already know, and depends on how comfortable you are with the technology to begin with.
Yeah, sounds good. And I follow the Cisco community on Twitter, and there's a lot of talk about automation.
Sure.
Like everything's going towards automation at the moment. So would you say it's better to, while starting to get knowledge on networks, should I also upskill myself on programming like Python and all that stuff? I think that's the best route to go because basically, yeah.
This is something that those of us that have been in the industry for a while kind of we laugh a little bit at this because we've been doing automation for 25 years. Automation is just a core part of IT. Being able to automate what you do in an environment is a common, completely natural part of working in information technology. The things that have changed recently is the cloud computing environment where you need to be able to orchestrate, which is the idea of automating, but really doing some fancy automations, really taking it to the next level of automation. And so you'll often hear people talk about, I need to learn how to automate. I need to learn how the cloud orchestration can work. And the thing that has really enabled us to do it more effectively today are other scripting languages like Python, which allow us to do some remarkable automation across multiple operating systems and be able to have something very standardized no matter what you happen to be working on. I know that technically that's programming. I try not to call it programming because people tend to think of programming as someone who's writing an application to run on a smartphone, or they're writing an application to run in a web browser that's got this big back-end process that works with a database. When we talk about automation, we're not talking about building an app. We're just talking about automating things that normally we'd have to type in ourselves, or automating things that can happen when something else occurs on the network and have it happen automatically while we're sleeping. That's what we need to be able to do. So I also tell people, and I absolutely encourage you, if you want to learn how to best automate and to how to best position your knowledge with everybody else in these jobs that you're competing against, learn as much Python as you can. Learn how to automate and script and do things automatically using that Python language. And I think you're going to be light years ahead of other people who have not spent the time to understand how to do that.
Okay, yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Really, really like what you're doing, and thanks.
I appreciate the call. Absolutely. Thank you. That's one of the things that we've been automating. I've been doing scripting and automation, and I think it comes back to, I don't want to have to spend a lot of time doing this myself. Can I find a way for the computer to do it for me? And that's sort of where everything happens with automation. And then once you can find a standardized way to do it, and Python's really enabled that for IT. It used to be we had these folks would do a PHP script. Those folks would do a bash script. These folks would do a PowerShell script. How can I make it just work together? How can I make something that I can standardize across all operating systems, across all APIs, across one place? And Python's really been able to do a lot of that for us. It's not the be-all, end-all. It doesn't do everything, but incredibly valuable to be able to have that skill. We're running a little bit long on time, but I'm going to go back to the phones anyway. 703, hi caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hi. I'm Jessica, and I'm actually calling from like the DC area.
Okay, thanks for calling.
In Virginia. Yeah, no worries. So I had a couple questions regarding RAID, because I've talked to some friends who work in some of the databases around here, and one of them works for Dell, and they're like, well, the RAID lights or the fault lights, they're, amber, red, and green. And then when I talked to a person that worked for like a Cisco RAID data center, they were like, no, ours are blue. So
right.
I'm like,
mine are blue too. On my array that I have in my data center, they're blue lights. Sure. So what's your question about those?
So what do the fault lights mean? Because I watched one of the videos that you had in the fault lights weren't really touched on. It was more like, oh, this is hot swappable.
Yep. That's where it's going to be, because every manufacturer does things differently. The RAID format or the RAID standard doesn't have anything to do with what color lights or how the errors are presented to the end user. It's only talking about how the data is laid out on the drives. So it's up to the manufacturer of the drive array to give the human beings some type of feedback on how things are going. And as you've mentioned, some manufacturers have a red, yellow, green. Other manufacturers, it's blue or it's not blue. Other manufacturers, it's blue and red. On mine, it's blue and red. And I think sometimes it's blue and it blinks is one that tells me something. So it's all different depending on where you go. So the questions you're going to get on an exam are not going to ask you about the color of a certain light. And you see this also on the A+. It's not going to ask you about the BIOS. The BIOS beeped X number of times. They're never going to ask you that, because some manufacturers, 3 beeps means that the memory is bad. On other manufacturers' motherboards, 3 beeps means that the video display is bad. With some RAID arrays, having a flashing light means that things are working perfectly well. On other RAID arrays, a flashing light means that things are horrible and that drive has failed. So you're never going to see a question that tries to lock you into a color or to a number of lights or to anything. It's really going to say, this drive has failed. What do you do? This drive is starting to fail. What are your options? That's the really important part of this. Then it doesn't matter what the manufacturer says. You can look up in the manufacturer's documentation, oh, it's yellow. That means the drive has failed. Now what do I do? It's the same question, except now you're dealing with a specific manufacturers of equipment. Focus on RAID and focus on how many drives are required and what you do if a particular drive fails. Do you simply replace the drive? Do you have to replace the drive and restore it from a backup? When you replace the drive, does it simply rebuild itself? Well, it will depend on the RAID that's being used and how many drives you have. That's what you should focus on.
Okay, got you. And then I'm actually in a very dense data center area.
Yes, you are.
And a lot, yeah, there's a ton going up every day.
Yep.
So a lot of them want me to have a security clearance.
Yes.
And so, so right now I'm starting with A+ to see if I can even do it. Like, I've taken the first one and I got like a 428 out of a 675. But I kind of knew I was going to flunk it to begin with, because I'm literally coming from like the beauty industry. So there's nothing IT about that. But I was just wondering, like, should I do A plus and then Security plus? Because I have one friend who literally just jumped into Security plus, and he's doing just fine. But I kind of wanted to have options because I'm not quite sure, like, what the federal government would want me to do, because I'm going to get tethered into that anyways, because it's so prevalent in my area.
That's right. That's right. And you're right to kind of think about that. And it's all about, in your particular neck of the woods, and we're talking specifically about the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, is that there is a huge emphasis in really Department of Defense baseline certifications. This is a standard from the Department of Defense. It's their DoD 8570.1 standard, where they talk about a minimum certification you would need to be able to work at a particular level within the Department of Defense and Department of Defense vendors. And because that's such a broad, large number of employers in the area, it even in some places goes outside the scope of Department of Defense, just because why wouldn't we follow those standards? They must be really good because the DoD uses them. Those standards start with a Security Plus. So there's tons of standards and different levels and things you would look at, but Security Plus is the one that is sort of the minimum to be able to get into the standards that most people are looking at, which are the IAT level 2s that are looking at those DoD jobs. And that's why I mentioned earlier, if you look at CompTIA's website, they tell you start with A plus, then move to Network Plus, then go to Security Plus. But for the people that are working with these DoD organizations that are in Maryland, they're in DC, they're in Virginia, they're not even bothering with A plus and Network Plus. They're jumping right to Security Plus, and they're starting there with no IT experience, with no knowledge at all of IT. Their Security Plus is the first place they go to. Now, fortunately, and perhaps even in many ways, Security Plus, I think, would be easier for a lot of people who have no IT experience, because it really does start at the beginning of security and works you through a lot of security concepts that are process and procedure. You don't learn at all about detailed technology with Security Plus. You're not learning about CPUs. You're not learning about RAID. You're not learning about operating systems at that level. You're really learning about technology terms that you would use in security environments. There's more detailed knowledge you have to know. They do talk about cryptography and talk about some of the technologies used with cryptography, but it's one exam. A lot of it is process and procedure, understanding what the standards are, what the rules and regulations are. That's not really computer related. There are plenty of rules and regulations in the beauty industry. There's plenty of rules and regulations in IT. That's where there's a nice comparison there. And you don't have to work at the command line. There's at least not a lot at the command line in Security Plus. So there's some advantages for somebody walking in off the street who has no IT experience, starting with Security Plus. And a lot of the people that come to my site from your particular neck of the woods are jumping right into Security Plus and just ignoring A plus and Network Plus completely. It's a perfectly valid strategy for somebody who happens to live in your area.
Okay, guys. I'm probably thinking I might just switch into that, because I already have a friend that I've known for 4 years literally jumped into the Security Plus, and he's having a ball.
In your particular geography, it's a much bigger advantage to have Security Plus in your pocket than A plus or Network Plus.
I'm starting to see that after because I've been studying A plus for a while now, and I'm like, you know what? If my friend, fresh off the boat from 5 years ago, can get Security Plus and already make more than me, and the same amount of time that I've lived here, I'm like, I got to start doing this too. So.
That's the starting point. In DC, that's the starting point. Weirdly enough, it doesn't seem to make sense, but that's where the starting point is.
Yeah, I think I need to switch switch lanes then, and probably go for the Security Plus first then.
There's a
So,
little,
like,
you won't lose
more
a
maximize my
ton.
time.
There's a little bit of overlap. So you won't be starting at ground zero, fortunately, but there's plenty to learn in Security Plus and a perfectly good certification to have regardless.
Okay. And then would I need to, it kind of overlaps like a previous caller's question. I'm literally working with a 2009 gaming computer from Dell.
Sure.
And I need to purchase a different one. And I'm like, okay, do more industry leaders, in this area use Windows, or do they use Mac, or is it easier to virtualize a Mac, or is it easier to virtualize a Windows system?
It's very broad. For as far as the Security Plus certification is involved, you don't need to get a new computer for that. There's not a ton of hands-on computer-related tasks that you're going to have to do. It's nothing like A Plus from that perspective. So you would not necessarily need a new computer to do that. As far as the security industry is concerned, and I'm speaking as someone who worked as a security SE for a number of years with the Next Gen Firewall company, we all had Macs. We all ran Mac OS because you didn't have to worry about some of the security issues that Windows and some of the limitations that Windows brought when it came to working at a technical level with the operating system. But the federal government does tons of Windows. They do tons of Linux, and they do quite a bit of Mac OS. So I think if you're in the market for a new computer, then Mac OS might be a good choice. But you're also, whenever you get into those roles in IT in the federal government, there's going to be a big need for you to understand Windows and how it operates. A Mac, of course, allows you, at least today, to dual boot between both of those. You can start up your Mac as a Windows machine. So you've got kind of both ways to work that angle. If they want you to see running Windows as your base operating system, you click a button, reboot, and you're running Windows as your base operating system. So that might give you some advantages. Plus, you have the advantage of maybe learning a little bit about Mac OS along those lines. And with security, that could be pretty important.
Okay, got you. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate the call. I've got time for about one other call. I know that some people have been calling and holding for a very long time. I hate to do this, but I also feel that at some point my voice will go out. So we're going to keep going, though, since we are here. We got a marathon session going to 773. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, Joe Darvish. Thank you, sir. Nice talking to you. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for calling again. What can we do for you?
Professor, what is the best software to do remote troubleshooting?
Oh.
I mean, free one. Yes.
This is probably there's a huge industry in this. You've probably seen online tons of companies that will allow you to do remote control of machines. And it's a very broad market because people need it for different things. I've used I've used TeamViewer. I've used the built-in remote desktop in Windows. I've used Chrome has a remote desktop function. I've used LogMeIn, people on the website mentioning that one as well. I've used a lot of different ones depending on what I needed to do. With Mac OS, Mac OS is a built-in remote desktop if I need to manage another Mac system. So there's a lot of options available. Do you just need something to ad hoc communicate to somebody who's a family member, or are you setting up a business where you need to find a way to communicate over a remote desktop connection to a local business and be able to manage those devices?
Indeed.
That's really the question. Yes. There's a lot of options there, because if you're in business, if you're setting up a company and you need to be able at 3 a.m, you get a message that says backups have failed and these backups have to complete tonight. You need some way to get into that company's business to be able to get on that backup server, restart the backup process, and make sure everything gets backed up properly. So there are tons of choices out there, some of them free, some of them not free, that would allow you to make that happen. And you also have the challenge when you're talking about these things, and this is a significant concern, is how do you make sure those are secure? The last thing you want to do, and many companies have had breaches this way. There was a huge, very popular one dealing with a sandwich company that had remote desktops set up on their systems, but did not have any passwords. And the bad guys got into those systems very easily with a remote desktop, set up their software to begin pulling off all of the credit card numbers. And every time somebody bought a sandwich, the bad guys got a credit card number. So those are also concerns about this. Free is not necessarily good, and good is not necessarily secure. So you kind of have to balance those things back and forth when you're working with them.
Wonderful. Thank you for the answer. One more question. I know you're kind of pressed on time. What is the best software to transfer a large file from computer to a remote, or just location close to you? Just transferring a large file. What software would you advise? This is a constant problem. Not just large files, but I think any files. I recently was working. I have this business, so I have a lawyer. Everybody who has a business probably has a lawyer they work with. And I have a lawyer that's an intellectual property lawyer, because when I write a book, I have to make sure that the book is properly copyrighted. If I create a video course, I have to make sure, and I want to make sure, and I register that with the Copyright Office every time I finish a video course. Well, I finish a video course, and you're talking about 4 gigs of video data. Now, how do you get 4 gigs of videos to the federal government's Copyright Office? And the answer, it's really, really hard to do. They are not prepared for this level of data transfer. There's a number of companies out there that do this kind of thing, though, where they make it easy, where you can drag it and drop it and put it there. A lot of people just simply use Amazon's S3 service. They use some type of Amazon service to be able to do that. Amazon has the storage. They have upload capabilities. It's a very solid network, and they use that. There's other solutions. I'm going to look up mine that I use. I have a third party that prints all of my books, that manages all the shipping for me. They handle everything. And when I send them a file, I'm trying to remember how we do this. I don't have it on the page here, but they have another one that they have a service on the back end where I simply drop it into a website and it does that. People on the chat room are doing things like free file sync, send this file. Somebody else said rsync, which doesn't quite fit that scenario, but certainly useful. I use rsync with the servers here at professormesser.com. There's a lot of third parties that do that kind of thing. There's no good way to do it in the built-in operating system, though. There's no good way to do it in Windows. There's no good way to do it in Mac OS. There's no good way to do it as part of Linux. You kind of have to find a third party that would allow you to put a big file there that then would allow someone else to grab it and I guess do that securely. And there are a few out there that make that happen. If you catch me or send me an email directly to my website, I can find out the one that I use with the company that prints my books. So I can at least give you that option. But there's plenty out there that you can Google to find how to do remote or separate sending of very large files. Because as you mentioned, that's a challenge, and it's something we use all the time. Wonderful. Thank you for the answer. And one last question, which might be a little bit refresher for you. How would you use the criteria to use the best, to buy the best laptop? With all these laptops available, and they keep showing you deals and everything, How would you just filter one?
Oh, it's such a problem to figure out what is best, though. Whenever I start talking to people about what they need, sometimes it diverts away from a laptop, goes to a tablet. Other people that are working with laptops, they need more memory. Other people, like if I work on a laptop, I need it to be able to do video editing. So it needs to be a powerful graphics adapter inside of the laptop. Some people they want to do a lot of gaming on their laptop. They want to be mobile with their laptop and do gaming. So they need sort of a combination. They need to make sure that it's got the CPU power. They need the video adapter inside of it needs to be powerful. They need plenty of memory, and they need an SSD. So it's kind of a combination of things to be able to make it work. Sometimes people just need the cheapest thing they can buy at Best Buy. Other times people need something that they can customize themselves. So there's no best, I don't think. it's sort of a combination of different requirements. It's almost a consulting job to figure out what do you need to do with this laptop and then figuring out where to go from there. I think the big players, the ones that are selling laptops at Best Buy, are very often the best ones to go to because it's easier to get parts for them. If I get a Dell, I know I can get parts for a Dell. If I get one of these, an HP, I know I can get parts for an HP. Is Dell a great company? Is HP a great company? The laptops aren't horrible. But I know that if something goes wrong, that I have some options available for having either Dell, HP, or at least a third party get the parts I need to be able to work on those. And sometimes that customer service is the most important part.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'm interested in buying the book that you have published about question and answers in A+. And those books are, as you said, from your website. I could be able to order one.
They're all on my website. Yep, everything I sell is on the website.
Wonderful.
I do everything directly from there, so I ship it out to you or give you the digital version depending on which one you need.
Yes, the one I heard about it, there are really great resources, really great resource, and very focused. So people tell me they really have enjoyed it, and I hope to get one soon myself. And thank you very much for your hard work and for such a great help that you provide for everybody. You really are like a channel. You light the road for everybody. Thank you, sir. You have a great day and stay healthy. Thank you, sir.
And you as well. Thank you so much. That's very kind. I appreciate it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. So it's one of those things where it just all works out, I think. On the chat room, somebody was mentioning this and doing file sharing of large files. And I've done this before as well, as use something like Google Drive, Dropbox. Those are good options as well. What is the OneDrive from Microsoft? Those are good options too, because you can share them, send them out. They work well. I don't know why I didn't think of that one. That's brilliant. Very good to have those there. I'm going to try to go to the top of the hour. I apologize for the folks that are calling in. Let's go back to the phones though. The 571 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for holding for so long.
Hey, I am Sid Lakhani, and I'm 16 years old, and I'm from Virginia.
Thanks for calling. What's your question?
So my question is that I'm starting off at A+ right now, and my goal is to end up with A+ by the end of this month. So is there going to be any summer jobs that are there for teenagers that have A+?
There certainly could be. This is your biggest challenge, and it's not just people who are in high school or people coming out of college. It's just people in the industry in general, is how do you get your foot in the door? How do you find the job that you're going to be able to work through? Now, you do have some advantages, I think, if you're in high school or if you're in college, is that there's a number of jobs that you can get into and either get paid minimum wage or get paid an income as an intern, where there's no expectation that you're going to be there permanently, but you are able to learn something in the meantime. And these are great things to do. But very often, you have to know somebody who has those jobs available. That's one where in your area, it's nice to know or start making a list of the different places that do this kind of thing. There might be a company that repairs tablet computers that needs a high school student for the summer. There may be a company that is ramping back up now after all of this virus stuff has been going on, and now they've decided we have to open the doors and start doing things. They may need somebody to help them ramp up with certain projects. Universities, schools, colleges, or even churches are good places to check for these types of things. Even if you only go in and just make sure their antivirus is up to date and the computers are running okay, and it takes you 3 hours a week to do that, that's valuable experience that you can put on a resume. People in the chat room made a good point, is to try Meetup as well. There are different support groups in different areas that like to meet either now online or hopefully in the future we'll be able to meet in person, where you can start meeting some of these people who work at these places. And if you know them, this goes back to doing that people networking that I mentioned earlier. If you can meet them and get to know them, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I know you from the Microsoft user group. I thought I'd touch base because I'm out for the summer and I'm looking for an intern position or a job. Do you know of anything? You're not even asking them to give you a job. You just have to ask people if you know anything. And we are a very small group. We know the people in our area. We tend to keep track of where everybody is. It's so much easier to keep track of people now on LinkedIn, which is a great way to do it. That's also a great thing to do. And make sure you have a LinkedIn page. Make sure you have a resume ready to go. Those are valuable things when people start asking, oh, well, tell me more about what you're looking to do. Oh, let me direct you to my LinkedIn page, and has a list of some of the projects I've worked on, has a list of my lab that I have at home. Here's some of the things I'm running on my network. Those are things that can be useful too. You almost have to set yourself up with your own, you are your own marketing team. So now it's time to start putting together all of those marketing tools so that you can jump over everybody else and get the jobs that they didn't even think about yet.
Yeah, and one more question that I have is after A+, my plan is to start off with Network Plus and then go to Security Plus, which is like kind of the normal that everyone goes with. So is that like a good starting off point? And after that, I have like future plans for CCNA as well.
I think you're right in the right direction. I think you've got the advantage of a little bit of advantage of time right now. You have the ability to get into and learn what you're doing while everybody else is just kind of trying to get out of high school or trying to get into college and get through those first 2 years of college. I love this idea, by the way, of getting these certifications and getting them in your pocket. I think, and I've said this before, that anything relating to networking is sort of the jumping off point for everything else in IT. The databases connect to the network. The servers connect to the network. The cloud-based systems, all running on the network. Your security technologies all have a huge network foundation. So the more you know about networking, the more options you will have available when it comes time to get your permanent job. So I think your idea of getting Network Plus and maybe then even jumping to CCNA before going the Security Plus route are all very good plans, especially given your age and the time that you have. That's a great knowledge to have as a foundation. And then you're able to jump from there to do whatever you like. Maybe you go get some Microsoft certifications. Maybe you get some cloud certifications. Maybe you get more Linux knowledge. It's a great place to get a jumping off point. And the CCNA, I think, is a good place to be that central hub.
Yeah, and that's all I had. Thank you for your time. Like, I know you've been doing this for like a long time. I've been also watching this since like we started the whole day.
I appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Thank you for sharing this course.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Oh, I dropped him. Oh, so sorry. We got it in there, though. You're very welcome. Happy to do it. And the chat room, some people asking, is Network Plus easier than CCNA? Dramatically easier. See, Network Plus is the entry-level networking. CCNA is not entry-level networking. Although some people start with CCNA. Some people jump over Network Plus because they know they want to get to CCNA. They know they're going to have a harder time with it because they don't have the foundation that Network Plus would have given them. And they just factor that into their learning process. They just know it's going to be longer to be able to get there. And that's why I think it's some people are able to jump into CCNA and do it that way. They just know that they're going to have to spend more time on the fundamentals, which is fine too. Maybe that's okay with what you want to do. What I would recommend is get a Network Plus book or the Network Plus exam objectives. Get a CCNA book, or in many cases books. CCNA is a big exam, and look at the differences. It's a dramatic difference. They are not comparable. They are very different in approach. They are very different in scope. They are very different in complexity. So make sure you understand that before you start making decisions on where you want to go. That's my recommendation. Very quickly, let's get to 513. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? 513. I heard it beep. I know you're there. Hi, caller. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. My name is Theo. I'm calling from SySa. Yes, sir. Hello?
Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, I'm calling from Cincinnati, Ohio. And in 2 weeks, I'll be doing the Network Plus, the A Plus class.
Okay.
Do you have an advice on? I mean, I've been watching your videos. I've ordered your book. Do you also have an advice on how to do the class? I mean, what to look for in the exam?
For your class that you're taking, is this one that will be over a certain time frame? Is this like over a number of months?
No, I'm taking the exam in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Plus exam in 2 weeks.
So you've been studying this. You've already
So
been
I'm
working
studying-
on this.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. There's a couple of things. I mentioned this earlier in the study group. Now that's hours ago. I mentioned this hours ago. Is that the exam does have a particular language to it. It has a particular cadence to the questions. It has a particular style of questions that it likes to ask. It doesn't ask a lot of trivia questions. It doesn't ask what HTTP stands for. It doesn't ask you what port does HTTP use. It doesn't ask you those things. It's asking you more of a scenario. I used some of those at the beginning part in the first hour. It asks you more about a story, about here's someone, he has a computer, it has this problem, what do you do? And very often it's asking you what's the best thing to do or what's the next thing you should do. And sometimes people aren't prepared for those because those are unusual questions. If it was, what port does HTTP use? You know that. But when they ask you, what is the next thing you should do? The best next thing you should do? That's a different kind of question. So I would say if you were preparing for the exam, try to get your hands on as much good Q&A as possible. Hopefully Q&A that really fits the same style as the exam. And if you're curious to know what those might be, I would recommend you go to the CompTIA subreddit at reddit.com/r/CompTIA. There's a lot of folks there that have taken the exam. They've also looked at a lot of the Q&A out there, and they can give you recommendations on what they think the best Q&A might be. I think those would be good things for you to do, especially if you're getting ready to take your exam. You're kind of at that point where you do want to test yourself and see if you are ready.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm so nervous, but I'm hoping that I get it done. But thank you so much for your help.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck.
Thank you, sir.
You know, also make sure you go through the exam objectives. That's your checklist. Go through the objectives. If you can explain to somebody what that checklist, what that piece on the checklist means, then you're in good shape. That's one of those things that you work through. One more. I know we're at 3 o'clock. Mrs. Professor Messer's probably wondering what happened to me, but we're going to the next call anyway. 757. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Cyrus from Virginia. Like the last guy before last. So, I had a quick question about like a wireless network standards. Now I'm a kind of weird type of learner. Like if you show me a SATA cable, I'll be able to like touch it, see it, and like be able to tell you what it's for. But for some reason, like these 801.AC, 801.N, I'm having a difficult time like understanding what they're for, right? So obviously, I can just go through flashcards until like it's brand in my mind. But I was hoping you can like show me what would be the most influential ones, like the most important ones.
Well, fortunately, you only have to deal with 4 of, I guess, really 5 of them total on the A+. If you look at the A+ exam objectives, they only have to go through a number of them. Fortunately, they didn't make a million of these things, and they've kind of rolled out over time. For those, a lot of us who are just getting into this, you probably only know about 802.11n, and maybe you've learned about 802.11ac. But most of us working in this industry probably never worked with 802.11a, 802.11b. You never dealt with those things. And for those of you not familiar with this naming convention, with the IEEE is the company or the organization that sets the standards. It's a bunch of people who are engineers, and they design what the standards are going to be for these technologies. That way everybody can go to one place and say, okay, this is how you build an 802.11ac device, and everybody who has an 802.11ac device has to do it this way. Well, that letter that's at the end is the version number of the 802.11 standard. So the very first 802.11 standard that came out was 802.11, which nobody really used, interestingly enough. I think it was a 2 megabit per second standard that really didn't catch on. It was very, very early on. The first standards people started using was the next one, which was 802.11a. They stuck an A at the end to show that this version was the next one on the list. So that once you get to that point, now people start adding on to the standards. And for example, the 802.11b, the 802.11, and they actually had a C and a D and an E and an F, and finally 802.11g. We started adding on to those. So as you've gone through time, we've added on these letters to the end of these. And in some cases, we've incorporated earlier versions into the current version. So for example, 802.11ac also incorporates a lot of the functionality of 802.11n, but still keeps it as its own separate standard. How do you remember all these things and where do you separate them? Fortunately, with A+, they really are only looking for you to understand what frequency does it use and maybe how fast does it go. They aren't looking for a lot of detail about that standard itself. They are really interested that you know if you're in an environment that has to use a 5 gigahertz standard because of the type of environment you're working it in, what standard would apply there. So fortunately, there's only a few choices that you could go with on that case. So that's what I would recommend for you as well, is really focus on kind of the broad understanding of what that standard is. And in my video, I do give you kind of a chart that has kind of the 4 or 5 different columns you would ever need to know about that standard. As long as you know that, you're in fine shape. Everything else is the same across all of them.
All right. Thank you very much. One last thing I would suggest to the guy who called prior to me is if you can look for any call center jobs in your area. I briefly worked at a web hosting one, and I gained a very good knowledge of DNS based off of that. And with the coronavirus, most people are working from home. So see if you can get your foot in the door. Have a blessed day, Professor. Thank you very much for the answer.
Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. What a good idea. It's a call center job, but it's for a technical company. What a great thing to consider or think about from that perspective. And I don't know why I didn't think about that myself, because I used to manage a call center, I used to be a director for a call center company. As horrible as that sounds, it was worse. And we had lots of clients who had people calling in with technical problems, and we had to have very knowledgeable technicians there to answer those questions about those. And it's interesting you bring up DNS, because of course it's always DNS to have that there. Last time through, we got one more on the line, so I'm going to take it. 773. Hi, caller. Calling back. What can we do for you?
Yes, this is Darvish in Chicago.
Yes.
Professor Messer, at the beginning of the program, you mentioned about a software that connects all the wireless devices together, and you said it's really good. I didn't write the name down. Can you please repeat that name? What was it?
What a good question. I don't remember what I was referring to. Was it, in what context was it?
No, sir. You said something that all the devices in a house or network could connect together without doing other things.
It was the first question on the study group, people in the chat room. It was the Bumblebee thing. It was the Zigbee was the technology, but it's not one you would ever run into. You'll never see when you're buying something that it's a Zigbee compatible product. It's sort of this standard Z-Wave and Zigbee are the two biggest competing standards right now. It's one of these where you plug it in and it just works with everything that happens to be in your home that also speaks Zigbee. I think for the most part, Z-Wave is probably the one that is taking the industry by storm. For example, I'm going to pull up the Z-Wave website. So if you have an Amazon device, you have one of those Amazon wireless devices in your house, that's a Z-Wave device. And that Amazon device, will talk to your door, and it'll talk to your lights, and it'll talk to your garage door. Well, that's because they all will also talk the Z-Wave. If there's a Zigbee, if your lights are on Zigbee, it's possible that the Z-Wave products won't be able to talk to those. You'd have to have some type of bridge that connects to your wireless, to your wired network, your Ethernet network, and that just becomes very complex. So the technology we were talking about was the Zigbee, and may want to look at your network. If you have an IoT device If you have one of these lights or locks or garage doors or any of those IoT type devices in your home, go do some research and see, is it running Z-Wave? Is it running Zigbee? Or is it running something else? There's a few others out there. That may be a good little task to go through to see what exactly is going through the air in my house. You may have no idea. It may be a surprise to all of us.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Professor. Wonderful to talk to you again, and thank you for information. Have a great day, sir. Thank you.
You too. Appreciate the call. Well, that brings us to, I say this brings us to the end. It probably brought me to the end a long time ago, but here we are. We had a great after show today. I'm sorry, we're going to have to kind of leave it at that. There's a few other folks on the line. I apologize not being able to get to you today. But one of the things that we do is we do these very often. And so we're here on a Tuesday, the 7th. On Thursday, the 9th, we do another one. It'll be our A+ 1002, the Core 2 study group is on Thursday. We'd love to have you come back and do some more of this. I've already written the questions. It's already ready to go. I might not even give you the answers like I did today before we get into them. I'll have to double check my work on that one. I appreciate you being here for that first hour and the Q&A we did. Thank you for being here in the second hour. Thanks for being here, chat room. Thanks for hanging in there with us and sitting through the calls and your suggestions and recommendations. It's always nice to have you there. We appreciate you and your support for everything we do here. We could not do it without you. Thanks for being here. And we will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everyone.